Welcome back, everybody, to Scale Success Reptile Podcast, episode 40. And tonight we have Eslin, Exotic Fire Hogs, and we're going to go deep dive into some brumation talk and stuff like that. But before we get into that, I want to quick shout out to some important organizations and the sponsorships. Um, First of all, USARC Florida. Make sure you guys get a membership, check it out. They help us fight any legislations that coming out in Florida. They're the spearhead of that. And then we have USARC National, also another nonprofit organization that helps us fight any legislation that are against either reptile, exotic animals, and animals in general. They always keep a lookout for anything that's coming up down the pipeline. Now, the sponsorships for this year and last year was Sea Serpents Rack and Incubators. If you guys are looking for a Sea Serpent rack or a PVC rack and PVC incubators, make sure you guys go check out Sea Serpents. Message Chris directly. Some of the best customer service in the reptile industry. Now, one of the newest sponsors of the podcast and the Clover's Reptile channel is Blake's Exotic Feeders, or you guys may also know him as Blake's Exotic Animal Ranch. Big shout out to Blake. Thank you for being a sponsor. If you guys are looking to diversify your feeding regimens and add some diversity to your animals, either, from the smallest as, 30, 40 gram hog nose, all the way up to large animals like berms, retics, now monitors, all that stuff. He has the perfect size for you, directly bred on his ranch and directly to you. And if you want to take your husbandry to the next level, record keeping, make sure you guys are able to understand what's going on with your collection from day one and be able to review your records. Check out Husbandry Pro. Use Clover 60 to be able to get a 60-day free trial. So again, big shout out to the sponsors, to the partnerships that we have. Always a big, thank you. They help us, continue what we do and help us day to day. So, Eslin, what's going on, bud? How things going today?
Good, man. Good. Any day above ground is a good day.
I hear that, man. So, this is the second time on the podcast. I think over maybe a year and a half since we had you on the first year. And now round two, I want to, bring in deep dive, more specific topics and stuff like that. So today we chose brumation. And that's a very important topic for first the species that we have and many other colubrids and many other reptiles, not just colubrids. There's many other reptiles that brumate, right?
Yeah.
But before we get into that, let's say hi to a few people that are here that have, comments. And guys, make sure you guys subscribe, hit the like button, go follow Exotic Fire Hogs on Instagram, on social media. And if you guys are here, make sure you drop a comment, say what's up. And if you have any questions about brumation, make sure you drop a super chat. Ro, what's going on, fam? Thanks for joining in. Eric's More Factory, thanks for joining in tonight. Bobby Evans, what's up? Thanks for joining in. And then we got Villarino Reptiles, Emilio, another South Florida guy. Thanks for joining in tonight. So, let's get into it. So, first of all, I wanted to overview your 2024 season, like your vending, all that stuff, because it was a big one for you, right? In all aspects of the reptile world for you.
Oh yeah, it was a very touch and go season for us, as far as vending more and putting myself out there in front of new people and doing what we do best, is talking and expanding our horizons and talking to people about the beautiful aspects of husbandry and how easy it can be, and try to eliminate some of the bad negative stigma that hognose have for being picky feeders and so on and so forth. But yeah, we did a lot this year. We conquered a lot more than I was very ambitious at first, and slowly as the year progressed, and we did more shows, going anywhere from Tinley, which is a big show, to California Super Show, to going to the Pomona, doing all over Texas. And we definitely spread we left a carbon footprint. We definitely did this year, and it was all it all worked out better than expected. which is a treat. And we're ready to do it again. Ready to do it again. Hit the floor, hit the floor running.
I hear that. It's beginning of 2025. And this the especially the vending, that was a big push for you last year, right? It started what I say fall of 2023, right? With the Dallas show, right?
Correct. Yeah, that was the first one. That's the first out of state show that we actually did ourselves, where
Yeah.
we brought the setup, did the whole nine, and it was a big learning curve. We made a
Hmm.
few mistakes. We regrouped. We found a better alternative, and we stuck to it. And we've been fine tuning it until we are where we are now. And there's always room for improvement. But yeah,
Yeah.
that first Dallas show, which is actually the first show that NARBC did in Dallas. That was the what was the show before? It was the
Arlington show.
Arlington show, and then from
Hmm.
Arlington, I moved over to Dallas. So that was a big experience as well. So for the first out of state show, to go to a Dallas show, it was a big eye opener for us. It
Yeah,
was one of your shows, one of your first shows too.
yeah, man. Yeah, we did I went out there the spring show. I was able to sign us up and for the fall. And when I went in the spring, it was still Arlington, and then something happened with the venue. They had to move to Dallas, and now it's continuing to Dallas, right? Um,
Yeah.
so last year with all the out of state shows. You do Daytona, Reptilian Nation here in West Palm, and stuff like that. What do you think was your best show overall? Sales and interaction of people.
I think. Well, they've all been, like I said, better than expected. I
Hmm.
didn't expect to do numbers. I just expected to be able to put myself out in front of new crowd and a lot of pet people, where they've always liked the species but never really got enough credible information to take the dive. As far as that goes, every show has been great. Then there's
Yeah.
other shows that do a little better, like the Pomona show and the Anaheim show were a little bit better as far as sales goes. You're going to a different market. Daytona's always been a great show for us too. So Daytona is a breeders market too. So sales are a little bit better there. But again, exposure.
Hmm.
Exposure. A lot of these shows after you get like the ripple sales where you go out there, you make a connection with the person. Sometimes it's a kid, sometimes it's an adult, and they're not ready right then and there. They're just intrigued about reptile show. A lot of them had never been to a show before, so you take the time to talk to them like you would anybody else, and you establish a relationship with them to the point where they're comfortable purchasing a snake, and you've given them enough advice. Hopefully, they message you along the way to get your opinion or so on and so forth, so they're going about it the right way, so it's less of a shock for the snake and for the new keeper. And from there it just keeps going. And we've
Yeah.
been well received. We've been very well received where we've gone. It was a shock to me to know that we have so many people actually watching videos and following our content and stuff like that. It's humbling, very humbling
Yeah.
to see that.
Yeah, man. And same thing, right, man? Like going to Texas, going out of state. It's been a very enjoyable experience. I think it's one of those things. You get what you put out. So so we attract the same people that we want to be around and stuff. But I thought, you have our Florida groups, right? You go to the event shows and the regular vendors and stuff like that. That's one thing that I thought about going out of state. I was like, damn, we're gonna be the outcasts, we're gonna be the outsiders. But not
Mm.
once have I felt that going to any of the shows out of state.
No.
The reptile community has been very tight, very welcoming.
Yeah.
As long as as long as you have a good setup, you have good animals, you have good presence, people are
Mm.
welcoming, you know.
That's the thing. See, I've been in the industry a little longer than you have, so I've made
Hmm.
relationships with people that have bred different species, and and I've seen it come full circle where I've come to actually shake hands with people that I've known, spoke to on the phone, helped, establish, collections and putting people in the right places to be able to build bonds and connections with other folks. And that's the one thing about the industry that I continue to enjoy, is that if you are doing things with the right intention and you're respectful and you're cordial, it always comes full circle. It always comes full circle. So you definitely feel welcome, like I did. I felt welcomed, where I was able to meet people, and they helped open doors that I didn't even know needed to be open. But because of the way the community comes together at moments like that, when they know that you're a good person and that you're an asset to the industry, or you're a good person for the community, you mean well, then yeah, man, they all come together and help.
Yeah.
And it's not in Florida. It's a little bit more cutthroat, though. Florida's a little bit more cutthroat, and the reason why is because there's a lot of resellers. There's a lot of people that have learned to make money out of animals in general. Unfortunately, sad to say, but it's the reality. So when you build relationships in Florida, a lot of them are based on what you can do for people rather than who you really are. And I feel like that's the difference outside of Florida. Not giving Florida a bad name or anything like that, but it's definitely, I've noticed that in Florida, a lot of people want to breed. Outside of Florida, a lot of people just want a really nice pet, or they want to start slow. Intentions of breeding later on, but first they want to learn species. First they want to do this, they want to do that. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
No, and
especially for us that we have kids. When we have kids, we take our kids with us to the show, and you could see that the experience that our kids have firsthand because they're around it, like all the time. Being in Florida, there's iguanas running loose. There's so much going on. The sheer passion of our kids alone passes on to the other kids, and it's like infectious. It's like they're just it shows. It shows.
Yeah.
We take a lot for granted in Florida, and then in other places, it's kind of like at the infancy stages in those states, even though they have a lot of good breeders from different species, but you could see where it's in the infancy stages.
Yeah, that's a good point with Florida, is that we are so used to having what we have here. So the reptile community is so big, and it's been around for so long, where it is a good amount of people. So there is a lot of more competition, especially at the shows. So it's not, sometimes I'm not gonna say not the friendliest, but it is you're set up next to a competition of who's gonna get the sale sometimes. And sometimes that does take over the friendly back and forth and stuff like that. But that's the biggest thing, like going out to different cities, different meeting different people, leaving an impression on those people is the biggest part. Even if you don't sell an animal that day or to that one person, right? Leaving the impression for later on is the biggest, I think, the biggest benefit of doing shows and going out of state and out of your local community.
Yeah. I think people, we're ever since COVID, I feel it more than ever, where people are a lot more educated when it comes to something that they want. Before it was more of an impulse. Now it's not as much of an impulse, because people do come to the table with a basic understanding at least. And when you talk to them, I guess there's a lot of people sharing good information across the US that they have an idea, and then you kind of like solidify their expectations. You give them a pointers, you give them direct, and they actually take it. I've been very shocked. I've been very, very, very shocked. Even little kids that are like 8 years old. Nate's 7, and I've heard him have conversations where he's talking to kids, telling them what to do, the temperatures, telling them how to set it up, and the kids like soaking it in, and then the parents are looking at me like, that's the genes talking, and I'm like, well, we do it unintentionally though. It's just part of it.
They're sponges, man. They're sponges. Yeah,
they are.
Yeah. And then with that, how with being able to do so many shows and all that stuff.
That's my
timer. The timer.
Yeah. That's that famous timer, man.
How was production for 2024 for you?
Production for 2024 was phenomenal. I honestly cannot say I had one one really bad thing happened. I had the normal, very small percentages of egg binding, which we had no catastrophes this year, which is phenomenal. It's hard, you know, when you're breeding at a certain level. We didn't split the season 2024 like we normally do. We did everything at the very beginning. That was a first for me, breeding this many animals at one shot. So it was very overwhelming. We had a lot of clutches. There was days where we had 16, 17 clutches, and then the next day was another 15, 16 clutches. So it was a lot. And then, of course, you know, when you have to set up babies, again, it's a lot of babies to set up at once.
Yeah.
But it was great. Fertility was great. We got very good odds in a lot of the pairings. We did very well. A lot of healthy animals. So we did very well as far as that goes. Now,
That's
this
great,
year,
man.
we're going to take it a little. We're going to go back to what we were doing before, where we're going to split the seasons.
Okay. So a learning curve, or is it, you know, just with what's going on in the market and stuff like that, or is it like just going back to what you already knew?
No, remember that I was doing this part-time. So I had a full-time job, and then I would come and do this part-time. So I was like, okay, well, now that I'm fully invested in doing this, I said, oh, I could handle doing this full-time. You know, I only have one employee, which is Gabriel, and it hurts to call him an employee because he's like a friend, and he comes over, you know, he works his hours, does his thing. But even for two people, you know, it can get to be a lot when you have to travel, do shows, one show a month and all that stuff. It takes a lot of prep work and everything. So I don't think for us at the rate that we are now, it's not due to the economy. It's due to the volume that we're working with. It's not something that I would want to go into knowing what the consequences are and what we'll do. So I rather have a little bit less production but better quality of life for everybody, including animals and myself, than to, you know, produce so many animals and then your season's gone or whatever. Just not beneficial to anybody.
Yeah. No, I get it, man. And then with the production comes the work, right? How did you have to like adjust with not just the amount of animals, but also doing all the shows? Did you do something different? Did you adjust differently how you were feeding, cleaning, all that stuff this year?
Well, yeah, when we take when we have a group of animals that we're taking to the shows, they're set aside. Those animals are set aside. Animals that we have on Morph Market tend to be the animals that are on Morph Market. Then we have a separate inventory of the animals that we're taking to shows back and forth. So we know that those animals that are going to go to the shows are going to be fed accordingly. Normal, the other animals that are going to stay within the room that are not going to be going back and forth are on a different schedule. That was one of the trickiest things to get used, because we have some adults, we have some sub-adults, and then we have the babies. So that was the hardest thing to do, but we know we came together and we agreed that the best thing for us to do was to do that. And then once we did that, was like 3 shows in, it was smooth sailing. Because before, what would happen was that we would feed them, you know, if because we usually fly out on a Friday. So that means that Friday morning they would have to be there, but that's Friday, you know, red eye Friday morning. 4 in the morning they had to be already at the airport or whatever. So that means that we would have to stop feeding them Monday, and then so they could digest their food and be okay until. So now with that schedule, we know exactly who's gonna go to the show, who isn't gonna go to the show. We know everything, so it's perfect. But that was definitely, again, one of those learning curves, one of those bumps in the road that we had to work around to have a better or smoother show. Because it's not fun being at the show and you got all these animals, and then, you know, you got 5, 6 every 20, 30 minutes that are, you know, pooping and digesting their food. And you got to go in there and clean up. It takes time from you, and it makes you look bad too when you have all these animals and you got so many poops in there. It's hard for you to control, but at the same time, you know, you can control it. You just need to plan ahead, and that's one of those things that I learned.
Yeah, no, that's a big one, because you know, same thing. Figuring out either finishing feeding Sunday night or Monday morning the latest. Anything past that is in travel with the vibration, the movement. It makes them poop all the time. You get to you start unpacking them, and you know there's poops left and right. So you have to clean
Yeah.
when you get there, and then while you're there too. Yeah, it adds extra work and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we also have to keep in mind that we have all of our adults, we have all of our sub adults, the holdbacks, we have all of that that still is on a schedule, it's on a regimen. So working Monday through Friday with the helper here, I can finish at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You know, go eat dinner. Sometimes I'm like, you know, love you guys. You know where to find me. You come right
Yeah.
back, spot clean, do whatever it is. It's a 24/7 job.
It
That's
is.
why
It is.
if you're at the level that we're at, if you don't love it, you won't handle it.
Yeah.
You have to be passionate about what you do it at this level.
Yeah.
And to be this meticulous and this detail oriented, and to be able to do the things that we often bite off more than we could chew, and we push through it, it's because of the passion that we have for the animals, and everything else is secondary. There's no way. It's difficult. It's difficult. As difficult as it is to do it. If I wasn't passionate about these animals, I understand. I understand why people quit.
Yeah. No, you brought a good point. You know, with having, because if I'm not wrong, but like this was the 2024 was the most production you've had for babies, right? So
At one time, yeah.
At one time. So
I think we had like the most babies we definitely had at one time, but we also had like a 30-40%, no, like a 30% increase in volume as well.
So with that, with the shows and stuff like that, it's easily to be able to, you know, overwhelm, get burnt out and stuff like that. How did you manage that? Because I feel like there's a lot of people to get to that point, you know, start, you know, over either producing or they over you know, bite more than you can chew thing. How did you manage that?
Having a good team, bro. Having you whenever I'm stressed out, be like, hey, I'm dealing with some stuff, man, and just talking it out. Having people in your corner that you know are goal oriented, down to earth, and legitimate good people. Then it doesn't. You don't have to have somebody that's only into reptiles in your corner to be able to see through some of the stuff that is obvious to other people because they're not in it. So having a good support team is important. And me doing the legwork, I'm the type of person that I have to have my hands. I have to get my hands dirty. Like I have to be involved. I can't just leave, disappear, come back, and be okay with whatever is happening. I have to be in control. And I feel like that adds to the level of stress, you know, because Gabriel does a phenomenal job. It's not that he doesn't do a great job. It's just when I'm not here, I understand it's a lot for him to do. So if I'm doing a show month and I'm gone for that 4 or 5 days, those are crucial days because the end of the week and the beginning of the week are the hardest days.
Yeah. So you go down from 2 people to 1 person, too.
On the 2 busiest days. The middle of the week is the easiest. The beginning of the week is the worst because that's when you're usually finishing, you're cleaning up everything that was, you know, like you're spot cleaning or cleaning out or whatever it is, and you're starting. So the beginning of the week is the most difficult. Then the end of the week is also difficult too because the end of the week is when you're making sure that everything is handled, you know? So those are 2 important days of the week. And if I'm gone, it's down to 1 person, you know? And then I'm also stressed out because that's when it's the hardest day for me to like travel. Plus I'm come back on that Monday. So I have very little contact. We're flying both of those days, wherever we're going. So, but yeah, again, having a good team. If you're doing this on your own, like you do with your girls, and you're out of town and your girls are there, communication is important.
It is.
You do the systematic. You have a system like I do, you know? So without your presence, they still know exactly what needs to get done without you being there. So if you give them just a little bit of guidance, they can do the best that they can, and it'll be close to what you wanted. So that by the time you get home, it's not as crazy for you to get back into the swing of things. But it is if you didn't have that team. If the room stayed by itself or all your snakes just left, it would be difficult. You wouldn't want to do that because everybody that works with live animals knows that whenever we decide to take a vacation or whenever we decide to do something, that's when catastrophe strikes. So
and then coming back
the
10
hardest
times
part
work.
Exactly. We're already tired from such long days. I don't party when I go to shows. I'm not the type of person to drink and get drunk. Like I have a drink and everything, but I'll have a drink during dinner and stuff. My partying days are over. I'll sit and talk to people and everything, but I'm there. I'm there to enjoy myself, but I'm also there to rest and get back into it and do it the next day and just enjoy myself in that aspect. But it takes a lot out of you. Doing shows takes a
Yeah.
lot out of you. Takes a lot of you. I'm 41 years old, and I feel like at the end of a long day, it's tough. It's tough. Remember that on a Friday you're barely eating. You're getting
Mm-hmm.
very, you're getting quick meals. On a Saturday, you're there from like 7 in the morning. If you're like us, bright and early, and you don't leave till 6 o'clock. And then if you're gonna
Yeah.
get a burger there, you already know it's not great quality food. Plus, you're paying $35, $40 for a burger and drinks. So you know what we do. We buy snacks at Walmart or Target,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So hold us down, and then we go and have a phenomenal meal that night, and then do it all over again. So it's
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. Vending is definitely, hard on the body. It takes a lot of time. It's draining. But it's a must, right? It's a part of it. And then when you get back, there is no break really. It's get back and back to the routine of things, you know.
Yeah, exactly. That's
So
why if you're not passionate about what you do and you generally enjoy what you do, I could see how people get burnt out. I could see how it becomes more stress than anything, because we deal
mhm.
with the high stress, environment. It's
Yeah.
definitely high stress. You're constantly doing something.
Yeah, you're
It's like a
constantly
it's
trying to
like a
figure these animals out.
yeah, exactly. And then you know
Yeah,
how it
man.
is. You can have a set amount of animals, and then you got to deal with each individual because they have different attitudes, and you got to deal with them. Sometimes when you feed them too quick, they don't want to eat. So you're like, okay, I know how this one is. You go in there slowly, and you got to approach them
Yeah.
differently. It's just their temperament is
Yeah.
completely different across the board. You got some that fly out, and then you got some that look at you like, okay, what's going on here? So
Yeah.
you got to
Yeah.
deal with that too. On top of that, but yeah, this year as a whole, 2024 actually, 2024 was great to us. I feel like we had great success. It taught us a lot of things that we didn't know we needed to learn. That's why I'm a strong advocate of educating people and sharing your information, because to be honest, a lot of the stuff that we learn, we take for granted, and we quickly assume that the other person knows, and unfortunately they don't, and they're gonna have to learn the hard way. And if I could share something so that it helps people, it keeps them from having to make the same mistakes that I made, then all the power to them. I would rather do that than not. But this year was great, and I know 2025 is gonna be better. Everything should
Yeah.
improve in 2025. We're going to be doing more shows. We're going to be doing different shows, testing our waters in a couple different states now too, and see how that goes. The hardest
Yeah.
part with the shows is getting into the circuit.
That
Some of
is,
these
yeah,
shows
man.
that are established, the waiting list is 2 years, 3 years. You could be on it, and like I've been trying to get into a specific show, and then they tell you 2 days before. I'm like, I'm in Florida. I can't
Yeah.
even book flights and do everything in 2 days.
Yeah. It's not
I'm
feasible.
sorry.
Yep.
So it's different. It's difficult. It's
Hmm.
difficult. But yeah,
So
I feel
and
like
to
I feel like the way. Go ahead.
what were you gonna say? You feel like what?
No, I feel like the way the year is shaping up, we should be hitting up at least 2 more states or 3 more states added to our usual roster.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. And to
Yeah.
end the recap of 2024 before we get into the brumation talk and that stuff. What was your you know biggest accomplishment of what you produced last year?
Biggest accomplishment. I didn't produce any worlds first, but I definitely got closer
Hmm.
to like personal goals. I believe this year, if everything goes as planned, then I'll finally get to see those animals go into fruition, and then it'll be great. But this year, I really didn't have a lot of pairings that were geared towards like the end goals. There were
Hmm.
more animals that were making pieces to get to those end goals. So we have one year where it's a lot of worlds first or attempts to hit worlds first, and then we have a year where we're producing more of the products and animals to get to those other levels. and adding diversity within those projects, which is those groups. So this was last year was one of those years where we didn't really aim for a lot of world's first or anything like that. We got a lot of high end animals for sure, but it wasn't like hitting goals. It was more like producing more of stuff that we've already produced, but better.
Yeah.
Better. Adding superconda or adding anaconda to some projects, triple quad gene animals, a lot of that cool stuff.
Yeah. You did hit some beautiful storm clouds this year though. So that was,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
a big thing,
2024.
right?
Yeah. 2024. We hit quite a few storm clouds and a storm cloud conda, and we were very fortunate that they were all male, no females.
Nice.
That's another thing too. We usually aim to like we always try to split that. We want to grow females first, and then we hit on the males later, and so they can catch up and stuff. That's how we kind of like do our projects. And we were very fortunate last year to hit males for all of the pieces that were pending were males, because we had all the females from the year before. So we were very fortunate. On top of hitting good odds, we were very fortunate to produce the males that we needed to continue those projects.
Wow.
I think that if I had to add anything, it would be that we got very, very lucky to hit those animals.
Yeah. And you know what? And that's where it really comes down to luck with some of this stuff, right? Like you can sit down and look at the calculator, even for outcomes of different combos. You can sit down and try to review the calculator and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that's just a educated guess of what's the outcome. It's what really comes. Yeah, whatever really comes out of that egg, it's a mystery until it comes out.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is difficult for newcomers to kind of wrap their head around. They go to the morph calculator and they're like, okay, so 1 in 4 I should hit 1 out of 4 eggs. I'm like, yeah, you should. It's not a guarantee though. Yeah. Same thing with possible hits. Like, people don't understand what possible really means. Possible doesn't mean that you're gonna get it, but it also doesn't mean that you're not gonna get it. It means you have a 66% chance of proving that gene out on that specific animal. Now, people are like, oh, I don't like to gamble. I'm like, okay, so if you had a 66% chance of hitting the lottery, would you play?
Of course. I mean, for most people, it'd be like, yeah, sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So if it makes sense, then yeah, but it depends, kind of like, cup half full, cup half empty. So, but when it comes to genetics, yeah, it's luck of the draw. It's really hard for you to control it unless you have pairings that are completely obvious, like we're hitting a recessive to another recessive visual, then you know that the whole clutch is going to be recessive.
Yeah.
But you work with the possibilities of fertility of some of those genes. Fertility is not the best. They'll get a big clutch and then half of them don't make it full term, and then they're like, oh, I don't know, I didn't hit the timing right,
Yeah. So and then you don't get to prove out the odds and stuff like that. You're like, I didn't have enough to prove it out, right?
Correct. Yeah. So it depends. That's why I'm telling you, we're in a high stress. We're in a high stress environment, 24/7.
Yeah. That saying, "Don't count chickens till they're hatched." It's so true for us, right? Yeah. We can say, "Oh, I'm planning to hit this and this and this and that," but until that animal pips out and it's eating and everything, you really can't even count on it.
Yeah. That's why when friends come over, they're like, no, like when friends come over, they're like, oh my God, I thought you had a bigger collection. And I'm like, nah, I don't necessarily have a big collection. I have a decent sized collection. I just have a diverse collection. I have a lot of diversity. And that's because I like to work on, multi-gene stuff. I like to work on, and I like to build myself up to that. And that's one of the things that I like to pride myself on, is having diversity. That's why when you go to my table, there's a little bit of everything. I can have lavenders. I can have Arctic lavenders. I can have lavender sables. I can have lavender combos, frosted combos. We can have sable combos. We can have a lot of different combos and animals to produce those combos, because we don't like to do visual to visual. We like to do the heads and everything to give diversity to the clutches too, because people want to start off and they don't want to invest everything that they got into one animal. Wait another year to do that. They can pick up a small pair, or maybe better their odds of hitting visuals down the road with a 1.2 that's unrelated versus having a a really big pairing because you're putting a lot of stress on one animal.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting a lot of stress on one pair. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, diversity is key. Diversity is key in genetics, and now as I'm doing this, a couple more years into it, and diversity also in different reptiles, different stuff that you can have on your table, I think is important as you go forward. Um,
Yeah.
you know, with your year 2024 closed out, great year. Unfortunately, some people didn't have the best year last year. Some people are saying the market's down. Um, it's people invested a lot up front and weren't able to recoup all that stuff. What are your thoughts on that right now? Because in being having friends in the ball python world, I hear a lot of people selling whole collections and all that stuff, or people, just getting out and stuff like that. And we've seen a few hognose specific breeders do that within the last like 3-4 months. What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, so having the experience that I have and seeing this happen before, it is a little unique because of the whole pandemic situation is
Mm-hmm.
unique. Uh, but dealing with what we're dealing with now, economy being the way that it is, and it is getting expensive, and it is expensive for a lot of people to be able to just go through their day to day. A lot of people are living off of credit, so I could see where some folks were blindsided by the fact that if I put a $500 animal with a $500 animal, that all the babies going to be 500 and above, and so on and so forth. And they get to the point where they actually produce, and then when it comes time to sell, they see somebody selling the same animal that they have for a fraction of what they're trying to sell it, and then they're gonna undercut. That's one of the reasons why the market is the way that it is, because people who do have the finances to invest, and there are people still investing a lot of money into the industry, because this is the time to get into a business. Whenever economy slows down, it's usually the time where people actually invest, because you can get the best bang for your buck because
Mm-hmm.
of people in those situations. But I feel like if you're to be a good breeder, to be a well-rounded breeder, you need to understand economics, and you need to understand certain things. And we were living in an era where everything was being purchased at top dollar and above top dollar. It wasn't just the housing market; it was everything. It's going to recalibrate itself to the point where it's going to be back to normal numbers, and then slowly, as demand grows and then supply diminishes, when so many people get out, unfortunately, because they can't handle it, it's going to go back to where it should be. Also, marketing is a big part of it. Being able to market yourself and talk to people and get yourself out there as an individual, first and foremost, as a breeder. Second, letting people know that you've made mistakes. You're not a robot. You're not perfect, and that you've learned from your mistakes, and that's why you're good at giving advice, is because you've been at the other side of the table before. And you know having a handout to help people does come back to you. It does help. But I feel like it's just another up and down. It's just another up
Mm-hmm.
and down in the industry. And what I can say about it is that we're the most advanced as an industry that I've ever seen us. There's so many professionals in this industry that pour their heart and soul into it and put us on a pedestal as a community. Like, you have a lot of big names that constantly are on YouTube, and they're on all over social medias, and they're on news stations, and they're on TV, and they're doing something, always talking good about the industry, always shedding light and bringing new faces. I feel like a lot of the issues that people are seeing is because they're following certain little circles. And then the negative is so easy to fall into the negative aspect of things, because it's always easier for you to see the cup half empty, especially when you have a lot of money invested into something and you're not getting, or you're not close to where you thought you would be. There's a psychological disadvantage at that point that allows you to fall into the negative realm of the reality of the world. And I feel like that's another part of what we're seeing right now. And then you
Yeah.
have you have other social platforms that, are always talking about the finances. And if you talk about the money aspect, and you're just a greedy breeder, you're only in it for the money and all that. So people can't really sit and educate other folks on how to run their business efficiently as far as that goes, because they're worried to get put on the chopping block and get canceled. So it's difficult. That's one of the things about the industry I wish we took more time into actually embracing, because it does help us. If we were better business people as a whole, then we would be able to work the numbers to the point where everybody would be happy. You're not going to see
Mm-hmm.
a price tag and have a heart attack at a show because some animal is, a couple $1,000s, and then
Yeah.
that's what they pay in rent in 1 month.
Yeah.
And there's an animal on the table, and there's multiple animals on the table, and they've never been to a reptile show before, and they're like sticker shocked. But then when you explain to them, you look, from getting to this animal to that animal, it takes 4 generations of you selectively breeding and hitting the best possible outcome. So that's the reason why that animal is valued at the way it is. If you're looking at it from an investment point of view, that animal puts you ahead. And you kind of like talk to people, then they start to understand. But again, it takes people educating.
Yeah.
And
That's the biggest thing.
yeah, people are looking at it, they're following trends, and they're looking at pricing, and they're like, okay, the best, you know everything, Swiss chocolate is expensive right now, so everybody wants to jump on the Swiss chocolate because the Swiss chocolate is high. And there's people out there with $20,000-$30,000 Swiss chocolate animals, and they're being sold. I'm not saying they're not. They're being sold. They're being sold for 2-3 years now. It's not just recent.
Mm-hmm.
It's been going on for a while. But then people are going to think that because they invest in that they're going to get to sell for that. And if they sell for anything less than that, then that's because the market is weak. And it's not. It's just people that don't understand that you have to put in your time. You have to put in your time. And if you get an animal and you're sitting there, and you market yourself to where you're relatable, then it'll be easier for you to get to reach the people that actually do spend that kind of money. Those kind of people already have their favorite breeders, or they have the people that they're searching for, and they're on one-on-one basis with. They're not the type of person that come and spend something on Morph Market because they see it. Those kind of people are not spending that money there. Those kind of people are the type of people that call you on the phone. Hey, listen, I'm looking for this, and this. Do you have it? Yeah. Okay. And then you move to
That's very true.
to private settings. You don't see that. So a lot of animals are being sold for top dollar. They're just being sold privately, and nobody shares that. The things that we see are the people that have, invested $10,000 on a group of animals, and by the time that they produce, those animals have lost value because supply is greater than demand. Also, because they didn't market themselves, they just completely vanished when they purchased it, and then they come back into the scene when they're ready to sell. And then at that point, they're looking at 5-6 people, and out of the 5 people that have them, 3 of them are big breeders, and then they think that they need to price that animal for half of what that breeder's selling it for, when in reality it makes them it's still not going to guarantee the sale. What it does is that it makes such a wide gap that people now don't want to invest, or don't even know what is going on, so they rather not deal with it, and then they end up contacting the breeders and working with them privately.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people don't know.
Yeah, that's such a great point of the person to person, text message, phone call, especially phone call deals that happen day to day between people that are already established within the reptile community. It's a big part of it. That's a really great point you brought up. And with you're the prime example of having such a great production last year, being able to do the shows, having keeping the business running, keeping your animals fed, all that stuff. But you did it gradually. You did it the correct way. So for anybody that's out there that's maybe teetering and tottering about, like, do I sell everything off? Do I downsize? What do I do? It's take the moment. Take the moment right now and really realize, what do you want to do? Do you want this as just a hobby, have a couple pets, all that stuff? I think try not make overnight rash decisions, and and pick up the phone call, and pick up the phone and make a call out to, like, some more experienced breeders that are out there. Pick their brains and see what they can do. because that's all it takes
that's one
sometimes.
that's one of the things that people don't realize too. People don't realize that we are actually closer. It's competitive, but
Hmm.
we're actually closer to each other than people actually understand. Like if I
Yes.
have an issue with somebody or somebody else has an issue with somebody, they're gonna pick up the phone. Hey, dude, have you dealt with this person before? What was your experience? I'm dealing with this, and then like you could build a relationship with other breeders. Also, they use you as a reference too. Like, oh, I'm gonna go buy with this person. Oh, if you need a reference, you could ask Eslin. I've purchased from
Hmm.
him before. And then like there's things like that go on. But I feel like if you're in a situation like I was in a situation two and a half years ago, and I said, okay, um, I'm gonna leave a 6-figure job to breed full time after me having a job and breeding reptiles as a hobby. Even though I was emotionally and financially invested heavily into it, it was still a hobby. But I had to face that. I had to, you know, go into that fork in the road that tells me yes or no. And I took the plunge. And it wasn't easy, but it's very, very gratifying and satisfying to know how much I've been able to grow, and at the expense where we're able to, go to different states, enjoy doing what we do, getting the exposure while we're still, functioning as a
Hmm.
business and growing at a successful, but at a pace where we know we can handle. Because it's very easy, this. It's very easy for you to go from not producing one baby, but you grew up 5 6 females to having 150 babies, and then you don't know what to do.
Hmm.
You really don't know what to do because the majority of the people don't even know how to raise a baby because they buy adults. And then if they're lucky, where those adults do well and they actually acclimate and they adjust and they breed, they don't know what to do. So they're already panicking because
Yeah.
they got $1,000 animal and they got another $3,000 $4,000 in couple animals, and they're not eating for them because they rushed and they didn't learn the process. And then guess what? They got to pick up the phone and ask questions. And then,
Yep.
if you're at that point where you don't have the experience, it's better for you to gain that experience before you take the full plunge. But if you're at the point where nothing scares you anymore and you feel confident enough where you can handle it, then I say go for it. Definitely go for it. It's never too late, and it's never too late to do something. Another topic that comes up quite often when I speak to other breeders that are actually at shows vending too, that they're either down the aisle from me, or they know that we're there, and you take the laps when they have free time and they come talk to me at the table. A lot of people are afraid of starting, like, to really invest because, oh, everything's already been produced. So I'm like, I don't really like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna start at the bottom. I started at the bottom. When I
Hmm.
started at the bottom, I started at the bottom, buying babies and buying some adults. Most of the adults passed away because I bought crappy breeders from other people that had already failed them, and they just got them back to weight and it crashed on me. And a lot of stuff that I learned along the way. But if I wouldn't have taken the plunge, I wouldn't be here where I'm at right now. And a lot of people are afraid to start because they think that, oh, there's other people that are so far ahead of them that it doesn't attract them to start at the bottom. But that's where you need to start. In order for
Yeah.
you to be able to get to the top and maintain yourself there, you can't be afraid of anything. You got to be able to handle whatever comes your way. And that's how you learn. You gain experience by learning, by doing the dirty work, by starting at the bottom, understanding genetics, talking to people, networking. Networking isn't only to sell, but networking is for you to educate yourself. You could pick up a
Yep.
book that's 10 years old, and that book will still give you some pointers that helps you kind of put yourself in a position where you're leveling up husbandry wise, and you're picking up techniques along the way to allow you to grow exponentially. But
Yeah.
that's one of the
No, for
reasons
sure.
why we're having a lot of folks that right now are having trouble selling animals. They don't know about genetics. You look at their posts don't make sense. You try to talk to them, and a lot of folks don't even know that if you breed 100% head to 100% head, your babies are also 66 or not 100% head. And then, there's a lot of information lost in translation. And I feel like that also comes from people being afraid to get mentored. Like, mentorship is actually it's beneficial, mutually beneficial, because I love mentoring people, man, because you've taught me stuff and you never owned a reptile in your life. You
Yeah.
had some when you were young. But as I'm mentoring people and I'm having conversations with people, I'm looking at it from a fresh pair of eyes, and it gives me a different outlook on stuff. And I even told you, look, I'm learning from you, dude. Ask me as many questions as you like. There's
Yeah.
no such thing as a dumb question, because we could learn together. And we did. We learned a lot.
Yeah, man.
From
Yeah.
never vending a show outside of the state to now doing multiple states. Like that's a big, that's a big accomplishment.
It is. It is. Yeah, man. And I think that's one of the
That's a
biggest
big
things, not
accomplishment.
being afraid to learn. Not having your walls up to be able to say, I don't know. A lot of people are afraid to say that. I don't
Yeah.
know, or I'm 36 years old. I already know what I know in my life. No, there's so much you could learn.
Yeah.
And for many aspects of
Exactly.
life, you know, and that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing. I think people first willing to learn and willing to put in the time to learn and work. It's that's invaluable.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but yeah,
one thing
man.
though. That's one
Hmm.
thing about doing what we do is you cannot be afraid of getting your hands dirty. You cannot be afraid of doing work, and you cannot be afraid of failing, because you're going to fail. You're going to fail, and you're going to fail hard, but you got to learn that lesson the first time. You cannot go through that 2 and 3 times, because then for sure you're not cut out for it. But if you have a good support system, you have friends or mentor or friends that are mentors, and you actually sit there and you speak and you talk to people while the situation is going, more often than not, you'll be able to save the situation and correct it. It's just people that go through it in silence because they're afraid to share, because they think that they're going to get judged. And what happens is that then those same people share their experience, but one-sided. They think that, because they didn't have help and because they failed, that it's very common for people to fail. It is, but it's also very common for folks to actually succeed in the situations. But it takes somebody to be able to bring down that wall and that barrier and actually open
Hmm.
up to other folks that have done it before. Now you just got to be
Hmm.
very careful who you open up to, because there's a lot of people in this industry that only care about money. They'll lure you in, and the next thing you know, they're selling you projects that are dead end because they need the money or because of whatever. And then that's one of the saddest situations in this industry too. But if you see somebody that's upfront and is nice and is cordial and is willing to give you information, then that's the type of person that you should, invest in and also learn from.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and then having that mentorship, for me, it helped a lot. But I think just even if and having a relationship or a mentor and being able to run certain ideas back and forth, it's so important. Like from the beginning, how you said you've been so successful last year was because of the team that you have, right? The people around you. That's what
Yeah.
really makes the success. If you think you can, do all this on your own and do a one man show, everything, it's impossible. You could maybe do it for a short time, but not for the
Yeah.
longevity. And I think that's the
On a
biggest thing we
small
need to
scale,
see. Hmm.
on a small scale, it's doable because I did it
Hmm.
alone for a long time. But on a smaller scale,
Hmm.
on a smaller scale. But when you get to the point where you're diversifying, like we don't only breed hognose. We breed a couple other species, some higher end, some just entry levels, just because we like the species. It gets difficult. It gets really difficult. And then, if, like I said, if you don't have a support system, you don't have a team that helps you. And a team doesn't mean they have to be on your payroll. A team is somebody
Correct.
that you could pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, dude, you got a weekend free? When do you have a weekend free? I need to put up an AC. I need to do whatever. I need to do these things and all that." And you just talk on a daily basis, and you let your frustrations out in a point where people could pick it up and return it in a positive light. It helps. It
Yep.
helps.
Yeah.
It
Does
helps. And
does
that's
man.
more. That's something that we should have more of in the industry. I remember we took a little bit of we took a little step away from social media because we went into the it was difficult for us to be able to do everything, like social media, the shows, breeding, even to keep up with Morph Market is difficult for me. You know that. I have my wife helping me. I have inventory. It's not even up. We got word of mouth. People contacting me all the time. I do sales that way. Like it's just all over the place for us. But just within that 1 year, a little over a year that I took, I could see how getting back into the social media groups and all that, Facebook groups and everything like that, I can see where there's a lot of people that haven't produced enough but have a lot of opinions and have a lot of stuff because they're listening to folks and they're seeing things, and that's good. It's very good, but at the same time, you cannot be overly confident. You got to be willing to take information in too, because there's not only one way to do this. There's several ways of doing this.
Correct. Yep.
And being in different states differs a lot, because for Brumation, you know what we have to do. We don't just open a window and say, okay, here you go, get to 35 degrees and 40. No, we have to put them in fridges. And we have to do so much that we're going to get into shortly. So it's difficult. It's difficult for certain people, but then there's obstacles that every state has to deal with. For us, it's not a problem warming up your room. For us, it's not a problem having humidity. For us, the issue comes when it's time to cool. And whenever you're doing light cycles, because our days are long. We're like on summer all the time.
Yep.
So you have to have a room that you can control the light cycles. You have to have this. You have to have that.
Yep.
And, and it's crucial.
Yeah. So, segueing into the brumation part and stuff like that, it's, when I tell people about brumation and I tell people that our snakes brumate, sometimes people say, what, a reptile goes into a, fridge that's 50, 40 degrees. They can't believe it. And for the people that don't know what brumation is, it is similar to hibernation, but for reptiles, brumation, they don't really go into full sleep. Their metabolism basically just slows down. There's still some activity, some drinking water, absorption of moisture, and some movement around. Right now, you're in brumation right now, right?
Yeah. I'm coming to the halfway point of brumation right now.
Okay.
For the first group.
Yeah. With brumation, it can be a scary topic. It could be a scary act for somebody to actually do it. Do you remember your first brumation?
I still have nightmares, man. Of course, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget putting animals into a fridge, and I'm so OCD, you know that. So I had to get weights on them, the date that they were going in, and checks. I would have to check on them. My first group of brumation was almost 50 animals. That was subadults and adults. Was 50 animals. My first brumation. That was 4 years after me starting the journey into breeding. 4 years. So the first 2 years of me breeding, I did not brumate because I was told you didn't need to. The people that I was getting information from told me that I didn't need to brumate. I would just throw males and females, and if the female was receptive, she'll let him breed. And I did that. And it was horrible. Horrible success rate. It was bad. Yeah. And then that's when I said, okay, I got to do something different because this is not working out. Of course, I had experience already. I had been breeding numerous different, very intricate species to breed, and I was very successful with them. So coming into hognose that were supposed to be quote unquote easy breeders and easy to breed because they're colubrids, they're not like your average colubrid. There's certain things that you can and cannot do that they're very hardy and robust for certain things, but then there's certain things that you need to really make it happen for them. And I feel brumation is one of those that you should not cut corners on, even though there's people that feel like you don't. I feel like for the person that's listening to this podcast and is worried about brumation and wondering if it is beneficial, it's 100% beneficial, and it's not only for breeding. You don't only brumate for breeding purposes. It definitely adds a lot of years to your animals, because the whole fasting period and how they actually sit dormant and relax in there to the point where they're living off of their body. They're living basically off of everything, the stored fat. That you could see females that are going in there that are year old. They're 70 to 100 gram females, and they go into brumation for 2 months, and when you bring them out, they look mature.
Yeah.
And then if you would have left them out, they wouldn't look mature. They would look like teenagers still. They'll be 150 grams because they'll be a lot fatter because they're eating more, but they will not mature. So there's something there that is very beneficial to them. I have a female now who's, I would say, probably 12 years old, 13-year-old female who still produces. I'll show you right now. Hold on. She is right here. So I've brumated her and I've taken her out. She's a big girl. I've brumated her and I've taken her out of brumation. She doesn't cycle eggs if I don't brumate her. If she brumates, she'll cycle eggs. And I feel like she's actually going into shed now. She's one of those females that I got as an adult. I got as an adult from a friend of mine, a local friend of mine that raised her from a baby that he produced. She's just a normal, nothing special. She's a normal, but she's a female that is consistent. And that was one of the first girls that I ever brumated. That was one of the first ones that I ever felt safe enough to brumate because, like I said, it's a stressful process in the very beginning because there's a lot of stuff that you're going into there that are unknown to you that doesn't, as a human, doesn't sit well with you because you're like, what? I'm not going to see my animals for 2 months. They have to be in total dark. They have to be between 45 and 40 to 45 degrees or 50 degrees. Like, what? No, you know? And it's stressful for you, especially around the holidays too, which there's an added stress on top of that. So you're like, you know, trying to enjoy the holidays while in the back of your mind, every time that you're at peace, you're thinking, are my animals alive? Is something going on? You know? So I know the holidays is a very touchy subject for a lot of people, me included. So it adds to that stress factor, you know? You're already on edge as it is because of holidays. Then on top of that, you got to deal with the back burner, having to, you know, think about brumation. But let me tell you something. Once I brumated my animals and I saw the success rate plus how well they responded to it on an individual basis, some of the animals that were picky feeders are like ravenous pigs after that. I was like, what? What is this? Some of the girls that I thought, and males too, that was like, what's going on? What changed in their mind? Like, what changed? It's a completely different snake. Yeah. And all I did was put it into brumation that I thought was going to cause more harm than good. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's a totally different snake in a good way, like in a positive way. And those are the ones that ended up being the best breeders for me. That's when I ended up, okay. Now I'm a lot more confident because I had already some hiccups dealing with in the very beginning. I'm like, okay, I'm a lot more confident now in what I'm doing. But from then till now, I've changed everything. Before I was taking advice from friends of mine too, and then I started, you know, slowly implementing things that made a lot more sense for me and the way that I do things here, and it helped. And I got a pretty good system, you know, because you're kind of mimicking the system as well, and it works. You have the same fridge that I do, except a little bit bigger. Yeah. In fact, last year when I had to brumate, 2023 when I brumated so many animals that my 3 fridges were full, and I had to send some to you. You had like 20 animals of mine.
Yep. Yeah. You know, and talking about like, you know, being afraid. And I remember the first year, same thing. You know, I got weights on everything. I would check them at least once a week, pop it open. Hey, are these things still alive? You know, even after seeing you do it, even after hearing from multiple people, they'll be fine. That mind, that thing that's in the back of your mind is like, oh, my animals are going to be okay, stuff like that. But after that first year, you know, having 100% success rate of putting them in, pulling them back out, having a good season and stuff like that. Now it's put them in, let them be, monitor the you know, the temps, basically it, and we're back in, you know, in the and bring them back out, not bothering, you know, let them stay there and stuff like that. Now you talk something about like, you know, with people saying, oh, they don't need to be brumated, or you don't need to brumate until you're about to breed or something like that. One thing is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what I mentioned to people is like mimicking the natural life cycle of, specifically hognose, what we're talking about, and that's what we breed currently.
Mm,
Um, these animals live in environments where it does get cold. It's not like, we say, okay, today, this year, now you're 2 years old and now it gets cold. They live from the year they're hatched out. They live in these environments for that. So
yeah.
it's a natural part of their life cycle in the wild, and us, I guess, trying to mimic that same environment for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first started hatching out sables and Lucy's as well, and
Hmm.
they'll hatch out a lot quicker. And I was like, what? And then some of the sables, when they hatch out, they were giving me trouble eating. So I'd have to do a quick brumation, 2 weeks, week and a half, 2 weeks, and bring them back out. And then they were phenomenal feeders after that. And I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of regions, when those animals are pooled, like locale specific localities, I feel like some of them do have that. It's integrated. It's in their DNA, and you can work with it. But if it's like an F1 animal or close to that or something along those lines, you have to deal with certain things that come with that gene pool, and you work on that. And then I remember the first sables that I got, first year producing sables, they were difficult to get going. And I tried scenting, I tried the unusual stuff, and it didn't work for me. So I had to put them in the fridge. Put them in the fridge in June. My fridge was kicked on in June. I put them in there. That was right before the second batch going in, and I put them in there for a week and a half. Brought them back out, warmed them back up slowly, and there were spitfires after that. Just tagging food. I was like, okay, good. And then that's when I started thinking, okay, this is even further proving the theory that is 100% beneficial. And it
Yeah.
is. I feel like it goes. I feel like they go through. If you notice when you brumate right after, they their first poop is like rancid. Like they're cleaning out everything inside. It's
Hmm.
green. It's weird. All sorts of stuff. I feel like that's just like cleaning their bowels and getting ready for spring and everything. And I feel like it does a lot to them mentally, physically as well, where it puts them where they need to be, like a very confident snake. And I feel like some animals, we deem them as bad feeders, but then as soon as they get brumated, they get corrected. And I feel like for those folks that don't brumate babies or don't brumate sub-adults or don't brumate anything, only adults, it's much stressful, I feel, for you to put an adult in brumation for the first time than to put a little baby. I feel like the babies are a little hardier when it comes to that. And then they already know how to prepare themselves for that as an adult. So if you're buying a sub-adult or you're buying an animal and you bought it right before you brumate your animals and you skip that brumation because they weren't large enough, and then you go and you start brumating it right before you plan to breed because they're in the roster for breeding, sometimes those animals can stress out a little bit
Hmm.
and they could lose a little bit of water weight. They dehydrate because they're constantly moving and they're fighting the brumation process because they're scared. And then when they come out, it takes them a little longer for them to be able to gain water weight again to the point where you're just going to breed them. But we fixed a lot of that too with changing the substrate when we're brumating now. Before we were
Yeah.
doing aspen with a little bit of water and doing it the classic way, which that's the way we were taught. And then slowly we started figuring out, let's just do coco coir with a little bit of sand and keep it damp in there. And then the animals came out phenomenal. We're like, okay, so that fixes that issue. There's always something else. There's always a better way. But we worked on a lot of different things that allowed us to get to the point where we're at now, where we're fairly confident with the system and the process.
Yeah, yeah, man. And talking about like the change, the visual, physical change that happens, with especially females, it's pretty wild to see, because there's definitely some kind of hormonal change that happens through
Yeah.
brumation that prepares their body for breeding.
Oh
The
yeah.
thickness,
You see their
the
face. Their face is like narrow.
hmm
The faces are narrow. The faces are real narrow, and you could actually see a neck when they're
hmm
babies, and then all of a sudden when they're mature, they come out, their heads are like big, rounded, like a shovel head, like a real nice firm head, like an adult looking
hmm
head. And then their necks are thicker. They're thicker in the front, and then you could see like they matured in there, even though they didn't eat. They didn't eat in there, but they
Yeah.
matured, and then when they come out, it's a completely different animal.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty wild to, like you said, like putting babies in,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing different behaviors change in just the 2 months for a couple month old, 6, 7 month old hatchling. It's pretty interesting to see. Now, one thing I definitely noticed was putting year old, year and a half in, animals, and coming out of brumation this year, um, was a major change in size, body composition. Where when I'm pulling out their tubs, I'm like, man, this looks like a totally different animal in their size and their body structure and stuff. So it seems like within that year to 2 year, phase of their life, it's pretty wild to see the changes that they go through brumation. And that's what I think, that's that definitely almost like, like that teenage year where the hormones start kicking in, and
Yeah,
their body starts changing, all that stuff. um so I
yeah,
think that's one of the biggest benefits, is that hormonal benefit and change that they go through brumation.
yeah, yeah. Um, I I see Bobby there saying he's talking about 40 to 45 degrees. Yeah, what I like to do is I use a temp gun, and I use the Inkbird temp guns that are very
Hmm.
accurate and they're inexpensive. And I always have like two or three of them just to make sure. Like I have two snake rooms. I have this room, and then I have the other room. I keep two in that room and two in this room.
Hmm.
And what I do is I go in the fridge and I temp gun the bottom, but the inside of the bin where the snakes are at, and then I make sure that that one is at I check the temperature, and then I check the one all the way at the top once they've already been sitting in there for like 2 days, so they could adjust. And then the top temperature, I try to get that around 52 degrees so that the bottom is always a little bit cooler. And then when I look to see, I want to make sure that they're almost as close to between 45 to 55 degrees, because there's always a temperature difference depending on how many animals you put in, how tall your fridge is. So I
Yeah.
try to aim for between 45 and 50 degrees, but usually it's more like 45 and like 52 degrees on the top. And then halfway through, I rearrange. I bring the ones from the top to the bottom and the ones from the bottom to the top. So that, the ones that have been cold get a little bit warm, and the ones that have been warm get a little cold. And
Yeah.
I feel like 50 degrees, 52 degrees is fine. You can go. I've heard of people going, no, not that I've heard. I know people that have gone to 35 degrees, 38 degrees, no problem, and I know that they can handle it. They can
Hmm.
handle it.
Yeah. Yeah, I did the last 2 years of brumation. I did 50 degrees. And like you said, it fluctuates between like 50, and for my fridge it was like between 48 and 50, not a big difference. And also depends on the
Mhm.
type of fridge, the type of fan your fridge has, the length, all that stuff. Trying to basically,
Yeah,
dial down. So it
yeah,
all depends. If you're using like a smaller, what's it called, like fridge or wine cooler, um there might be a less of a difference in temperature, and there's
yeah.
less movement of air. But this
Hmm.
year I went down to the temp on my thermostat. I went down to 45, to try to get them a little cooler. And same thing, great results. I was able to, still two to three different temperature gradients between the top and the bottom. And this year I had a full fridge,
Yeah.
with hatchlings, holdbacks, and breeders. I had a full
Correct.
fridge. So
Yeah,
I definitely saw the difference.
yeah. I'm telling you, it makes a big difference. It really
Hmm.
does. But you got to
Hmm.
be vigilant, though. One of the things that people don't realize too is that your thermostat is usually off. Your
Hmm.
thermostats, no matter how good they are, what quality they are, they need to be calibrated.
Hmm.
Thank you. Where do I plug it in? They need to be calibrated. And if they're not calibrated, then you're gonna be off anywhere from like 5 to even 10 degrees at certain times.
Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah.
So if you gotta be very, you gotta be on this side. Okay, thank you. You got to be very you got to be aware of, and you got to double check. Where is it?
Do we lose him? Hold on. Well, he comes back. Bobby, thanks for the super chat. Great questions. Definitely temps are the biggest thing that we're thinking about. So, what were you saying? I lost you froze for a little bit.
Oh no, that's why it's important, you know, to double check with the temp gun. To go in there manually and look at the temperature, because if I base my fridge, my thermostat off of my thermostat, I would be 10, 12 degrees off. My thermostat right
Yeah.
now is set at like 36 degrees. I can look at my Inkbird and show you my app, and it says 36 degrees, but it's really at 45.
Mm-hmm.
So if I put mine at 45, I'm going to be at 55, 65, 60 degrees. And then within that, I'm going to have a temperature difference between the bottom and the top. So you have to manually go in there with your temp gun and double check the temperature inside, because you want that animal to be cold. You don't want the fridge to be at a temperature, because if you're putting them in individual containers inside of a fridge, the air exchange, the fresh air exchange inside the container is always warmer than the outside.
Yep. Yep.
So you're going to check the exchange in the temperature within the fridge. It's going to be cold, but then each container is going to be warmer. So you have to be aware of that. That's one of the mistakes that a lot of people make in the very beginning. Their animals come out and they come out dehydrated, and they lose, 20, 30 grams. And then you're like, okay, well, that's not normal. What happened? And when they're like, oh, I kept it at 55 degrees. I go, did you set your thermostat at 55 degrees? Yeah, I set my thermostat. I go, did you temp gun? No, because it's 55. It should be at, no, it's not 55. It's going to be off. It's probably 10 degrees off. So if you're setting it at 55 and then it's 5 degrees off, your animals are at 60. They'll still eat at 60, 65 degrees. They'll still want to eat. When we were in Pomona, those animals, when I was taking them out, they're trying to eat my hand, and inside Pomona was like 65 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah, they're still active.
They're trying to eat me. At 65, 70 degrees, they're still trying to eat.
Mm-hmm. And you know what's another thing too? Talking about like thermostats, and we use the Inkbird, because relying on the thermostat of the actual like cool whatever, the fridge, wine cooler, whatever, it's not the best idea either, because most fridges you can't dial down to single digits. It's a range. So that's another big benefit of using the thermostat, where you could dial down to single digits and adjust and all that stuff. So that's one of the biggest, I think, things that people need to know. If you're going to brumate, buy a thermostat that can control cooling. I always recommend the Inkbird, because you could do it through Wi-Fi, monitor it, and then using also another sensor that monitors the temperature as well, right?
Yeah, there's a thermometer, a wireless thermometer that you add to your network for the Inkbird, and that is accurate, very accurate. And then you have the reading on your app. Then you also have little alarms that you put on. So God forbid the temperature goes above or below, then it'll text you pretty much. Your alarm comes on, your notification comes on, and it's on your Wi-Fi, which is awesome, because I could be at a show somewhere. I could be out to dinner, and I could just pull up my phone and look at the temperatures and make sure everything's okay. Make sure that, it's within range. And if the temperatures in the house are hot and it's showing fluctuation, then I know that I have the ability to bring or to adjust the temperatures as needed. But it's also something that comes with experience. In the very beginning, I had Rankles, but Rankles are not Wi-Fi. They're very reliable, they're bulletproof, but they're not Wi-Fi capable. It's a system that's made for big fridges and stuff. That's one of the ones that most people use. You got to hardwire it to your fridge and hardwire it to everything. It's very functional, very accurate, but it's not Wi-Fi capable. And I've had those fail before. I had that fail when I lost all those eggs in the incubator, because we use the fridges for incubators before I had the custom incubator made. So that's one of the things. You got to be very hands-on too, and understand where it is that you're needed and what attention you need to put towards what before you walk away and say everything's okay. Know that the first week of brumation, putting animals into the fridge is the most stressful, because you got to make sure that the temperatures are gradually going down. You got to check everything, make sure everybody's going down right. You got to make sure There's no escapees in there. You got to make sure everything's okay. You know, that first week is touch and go. After
Yeah.
that, when they're sleeping already, they're good. They're not going anywhere. Nothing's happening. You have a little bit more wiggle room. But yeah, temperatures can range. Like I said, I've heard people go as low as 30 degrees, as high as 55. I think 55 is borderline. I would definitely be better, and I would prefer it to be around 50 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah. I think above, 55, 60, getting closer to 60, you still see a lot of activity.
Yeah.
And talking about that, like one of the things coming out of brumation, as soon as it gets above that temperature, above like 55, 58, 60, they start moving. Their
Yeah.
their their activity is jumps back on. Their hunger jumps back on.
Especially
For
male.
yeah, for healthy animals, there is very little bit of delay in between like activity and the change of temperature. So that was very crazy to see how, oh, maybe my animals aren't going to eat. Majority of my animals eat straight out of brumation.
Yep.
You know.
Exactly. Exactly. I have the same result too. I just don't try to pump them with food right away. I give them a
Hmm.
small meal and get them going. But usually they're pretty. They go on to feeding pretty well, pretty
Yeah,
consistent.
they do. Yeah, and then another thing too, like what's interesting is we work with hognose and stuff, but there's many other species of reptiles that benefit from brumation.
Oh
One of
yeah.
the biggest ones is it's bearded dragons. That's one of the top you know animal in the reptile like hobby. It's
Hmm.
bearded dragons, and they benefit from
Yeah.
brumation.
Yeah.
So many tortoises.
Most
Hmm.
monitors. Most monitors too. They like
Monitors.
a temperature drop. They like all that
Yep.
stuff. It's
Yeah.
crucial to them. I
Yeah.
know chameleons, like panther chameleons. When I dealt with panther chameleons, they'll go through the winter blues too, where we're keeping them outdoors and the temperatures get into the 50s. Their color changes completely,
Hmm.
and then they'll get real dull for a good month and a half, 2 months, and then as spring comes back around, they'll have like this really thick shed, and then boom, their colors come right back.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal because every year was the same thing. Males get real dull, and then females too. And then as soon as spring came around, they pop that shed, and it's like a brand new chameleon. It's like
Yeah.
beautiful, vibrant color again. And then usually females will be very receptive right after that as well. They'll be very receptive. As soon as they're done with that shed, that's when I will know, okay, it's time to breed.
Hmm.
And that's those are cues, that you take. There's cues that you watching your animals, looking at the process and being completely in tune with what's going on, you can pick up on those things. You can pick up when animals are trying to tell you something, and you step in and you do what you need to do to get it to where they need to be. And people who actually pay attention and write things down, it's very important for you to write things down, because if you're having a season, you're gonna tell. Like for us, you have girls that ovulate right before you put them into brumation. So you're like, okay, well, if that's a girl that's ovulating for putting in brumation, is gonna be beneficial. But maybe I need to do a group earlier, because you get synchronized shedding. You could have 100 females, and out of 100 females, you'll have 30 girls that just go into synchronized shed, and that's an ovulation.
Hmm.
And it's you got to pay attention to that. And Florida for us is a little bit more uncommon, but I hear that happens a lot in Arizona. Happens a lot in places where they actually get that real cold winter, and they're in tune with what's going on the outside. For us,
Yeah.
sometimes in the summer, they'll skip feedings because it's been raining for 2 days or 3 days straight, and it's time for you to feed, and they don't want to eat in the rain because the pressure system is down. They feel like, even though they're not wet, they still feel like they're outside because
Yeah.
they're in tune with what's going on.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of babies not eat, and I've had a lot of animals completely skip feedings because of that, because it's raining outside.
Yeah. Yeah. That, and I think that's one of the benefits of actually doing it in a fridge is that it's very controlled environment,
Yeah.
where you can set exact temperatures, time frames, the light cycle, you set it up and able to get them in and out of brumation.
Yeah.
So with brumation, walk us through your process from the beginning of brumation, going through it, and then coming out of brumation.
Okay, so the first group of hogs, I like to put them in on Thanksgiving. That's been like the ritual for me. Thanksgiving, usually the middle of November
Hmm.
to the end of November. Is when I start, already processing it. And what I do is I have the group set out. So I have a group that I know those are the ones that are gonna go into brumation, males and females. And then I'll stop feeding them a week before I know, actually a week and a half before I know that they're gonna go into brumation. So I say my set day is usually the 27th. So usually by like the 20th or a little sooner, depending on their schedule, I'll stop feeding them so that I can go ahead and get them clean. And then I take the heat off 2 3 days before I put them into the fridge. I'll take the heat off so they can go back down to room temperature, and then they'll go into the fridge. And when they go into the fridge, they're gonna go into the fridge, a refrigerator that goes into like about 75 degrees, and then I'll gradually bring it down every other day, about 5 6 degrees until it gets to the temperature that I need it. And the reason why I don't put them into the fridge, which I know there's people that do that, that they'll just put them straight into the cold temperature, and that's actually okay too because I've seen it work for people. I had a friend in Arizona who would just open the window when it was 30 something degrees out, then his room would drop to 40 degrees right away overnight,
Yeah.
and then he would basically brumate everybody, and then they'll be there for 2.5 months. He'll shut the window, bring the heater. He'll have a oil heater, and then he'll bring it up, and that was it. That was his brumation, and he didn't have to worry about anything else. So there's processes, there's ways of doing it. For us though in Florida, and for whoever's having to battle Mother Nature the way we have to battle, putting them in the fridge is ideal. So I'll clean them out, put them in there as soon as I get them to like 75 degrees. By the time they come down to like 50 degrees, more or less 45, 50 degrees, then I'll wait 2 weeks, 8 weeks from then. And it's usually they'll be in the fridge around 9 10 weeks in total. So the whole brumation process is about 3 months. By the time that
Mhm.
we start to clean them out and putting them in the fridge and taking them out and offering food is about a 3 month process. You can go longer. I've heard of people keeping them in the fridge as far as 4 months and bringing them out, and they didn't lose much body weight either. So it's doable. I could only speak on what I've done and how I've, taken it to the point where I'm confident in the success and in the results. So once they get out of brumation, let's say it's time for me to take them out, I shut off the heat. I let them come up to room temperature gradually within the refrigerator. Once I see that they're already like around 75 degrees, I'll take them out, put them in, which is usually overnight. The next morning, we're putting them back inside their fresh bins with everything neutral or cleaned, everything fine, and they'll go. They usually go straight for water. They'll know where the water's at. They'll go in there, drink for the first 2 days, 3 days. By like the fifth day, I'm offering them a small meal. Usually they'll eat right away. If a female doesn't eat right away, I'll give her another 2 days. Offer again. If I notice that she's not eating, I'll offer the male. I'll try to breed them. Sometimes females, when they're ovulating, they don't want to eat. And if you sit and wait until they eat so that you can pair, you'll miss ovulations, and then
Yeah.
you'll have slugs on your first clutch, and then you'll have a good second clutch because you fertilize the second clutch.
Mhm.
So I've learned to kind of just go into breeding if they don't eat. I'll give them, it's usually about 5 to 10 days after brumation. If they haven't eaten, they're going straight to the male. And the
Yeah.
ones that have eaten usually show interest in the male right away. So I try to breed. Another thing too that I do is I manipulate the temperature. So all the females and males that are breeding are in their own racks. So it's like a whole rack. So that temperature is always going to be a little cooler than the animals that are still awake and have not been brumated. I try to keep my temperatures on those males at like 82 degrees. My ambient temperature inside the room is usually 75, 76 degrees. And then I keep that temperature like around 81, 82 degrees. The only time that they're at 85, 86 degrees hot spot is whenever they're with females. And it's important for you not to keep them too warm, because if they sit at the hot spot and warming up, two things can happen. One, they become lazy breeders, or two, they start to lose fertility because their sperm overcooks.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to keep them cooler.
Yeah. You know, and talking about like when to pair and seeing, feeding response to that stuff, knowing the behavior of the animal is so important, because sometimes you can see males and females behavior like straight out of brumation, being very active, starting to, was it do the laps around the tub and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
at that point, like you said, you shouldn't wait to get a meal in that animal. If they're seeing active, you seeing,
Yeah,
activity of males, rubbing their face against the tubs or stuff, go ahead and pair.
yeah.
And a lot of times once you pair and they're done breeding, the hunger
They'll
start
start.
kicks in fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because once they know that they've already successfully bred, and they're gonna start building eggs, you need to
Hmm.
pound them with food, vitamins, multivitamins, food, and then you also need to use your better judgment too. Sometimes when they start to get too big, you don't want to give them too much, because then you could start running into regurgitation issues, because females will gorge themselves to the point that they cannot digest, or they don't have enough space for everything that they're eating, because they're just not they're just hog nose. That's what they do.
Correct.
They eat
Yeah.
whatever they can when they can, and they're just gonna eat with their eyes, like how we say in Spanish, come con los ojos. So he's gonna be
Hmm.
eating with their eyes at that point. They're not necessarily eating because they're hungry. They're just eating because it's there.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so the protocol changes at that point. It's more on a one-on-one basis, because you can have 10 girls breeding at the same time, and then not all of them would cycle eggs at the same time either. Some of them might hold on another 2-3 weeks and then start cycling eggs, and then you might have some that start to cycle eggs right then and there from the first lock. In exactly 5 weeks, 6 weeks, you'll have eggs. And then some
Hmm.
of them won't start producing eggs until a month later, month and a half later, and then it'll take you 2 months, 2 3 months before you see eggs. So it could differ by female.
Yeah.
But what I tend to do is I try to space it. First week out of brumation, males are always going to be ready. The males are always ready. The males barely ever even eat out of brumation.
Yeah.
They already picked up pheromones in the room. The females are letting off all these pheromones. Males are ready to go. You see them pacing everywhere. Like they're locked. And usually males that are virgins that have never bred before are already showing the same interest in females as the proven males. What the virgin males lack is experience, so they'll sit on a female a lot longer trying to find where to put it than anything else.
Yeah.
So you have a male that goes straight into action, and then you have a male that is just poking around trying to find what to do, and they don't understand where to go or what to do, and then they finally figure it out. So that's why it's important for you to give those males just a little bit more time.
No, that's a good thing, and I think with we had a quick question from Casey Goff, and it's asking about vaccine fridge using for brumation. I don't think there's any specific fridge is best. Um, as long as you have holds temperature good, it's well insulated, and you can put a thermostat to it, you can figure it out and work it. I
I'm
don't
gonna
think
I'm
it.
gonna I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna let the cat in. He's over
Okay,
here
yeah.
now.
I don't think it needs to be any specific type of like a vaccine fridge or like a glass front fridge, um, because it's basically most of the time you control it through we recommend that you control it through an external thermostat to be able to monitor that stuff.
Correct. Yeah, it's ideal. It's ideal because it gives you added security. I
Hmm.
don't know exactly how they work, the vaccine fridges. I'm assuming it's a little bit more detailed than the regular wine coolers that we usually start with.
Yeah.
The industrial fridges that you and I have, Alvaro, they're pretty detailed too. I
Yeah.
think that the coldest that they get is like 30 degrees or something like that.
Hmm.
The problem with that fridge is that it's constantly on. With ours,
Yeah.
it's not constantly on. It only kicks on when it needs to,
Hmm.
which is another added benefit to having double security with the thermostat. It'll kick on and off. But there's also certain thermostats that don't work, that won't kick back on and off the way we need it. So having one that actually works, and I feel like the reason why the Inkbird works so well is because they use it for distilleries too, and for germination and all that. So
Hmm.
it has that capability, and they're inexpensive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And they have the what is it? The delay for the compressor. The compressor
yes,
delay, it's a big benefit. So,
yeah,
it doesn't burn it out with the, external turning off and on like it would with its own system.
yeah, yeah. It'll work though. I
Yeah,
mean,
it'll
for
work. Yeah.
thing, it should work if you can get it to 40. If you can get it, if uh, if you put a um thermostat wireless thermometer actually inside, it'll help you gauge it too. I don't suggest just using the thermostat temperature alone. You would need
Hmm.
something that is more accurate, because remember, you're not reading the ambient temperature in the fridge. You're actually reading the temperature that's inside the container where the
Correct.
animal is in,
Right.
because you have substrate in there that actually changes differently than just air. Air constantly changes, but for the temperature of the substrate and the air exchange inside to change is a lot more difficult than just opening the fridge and closing it. That would change the temperature inside. So when the fridge kicks on and off, it's kicking on and off the temperature that it's reading. It's not reading the temperature inside the snake. So you would
Hmm.
have to have, or suggest that you do have, a thermometer in there, or you manually check with your temp gun.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, like I don't think there's any specific any fridge can work as long as you get it to those right temperatures, 40, 50 degree range, and
Mm-hmm.
you should be fine. And then also another thing too is space. The way one of the biggest things that I've seen, and I've gotten messages sometimes, hey, would this wine cooler work and stuff. And the biggest issues I've seen with wine cooler is the rack system that they have, where it's such small spaces of
Yeah,
what, because it's meant for small wine bottles,
correct.
where it will be more difficult to get like an adult female and stuff like that in between the spaces. That's the biggest
Yeah,
things with wine coolers, unless you're gonna gut it out and just use the
yeah,
case and stuff like that.
yeah. And for us, we just stack it. I stack mine one on top of the other.
Hmm.
On
Hmm.
that one fridge with 1 gallon containers, and I have a 12 cubic foot fridge. I fit 42 females per, and then
Hmm.
males are half gallons, and I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I know I can get like 42, 44 females per stuff. I also give them a lot of space. There's people that give them a lot less space.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you were to keep them tight, you can double up. But I don't like to put too many animals in a single fridge, because it's just more difficult for them.
Yeah. Yep. And I think the more you pack that fridge, the harder it's got to work as well. And it's going to be harder to maintain that exact temperature you want as well.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
with that, Bobby asked about when do you pair. We covered it a little bit, but I don't think there's any specific, like, to anything we do. There's no specific rule, like, so many days out of brumation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
It's a
if
per snake basis. It's a per snake
Mhm.
basis. Some female might not be ovulating, and they don't show it. They'll show interest in the male, like they'll twitch once or twice, but then they'll just
Mhm.
go back to just chilling. And then you
Mhm.
have females that'll wag their tail and flag the males down, but then won't twitch. It's really about reading the female. If you put the male in there and you're gonna have one male to two different females, you're gonna want that male to go to the female showing the most interest first, and then
Yeah.
waiting for the other one to bounce around. Once the other one bounces back around, it could be 2, 3, 4 weeks later. So there's really no set time. It's not a rule of thumb like, well, because you're putting them in brumation that it automatically kicks them into ovulation. It's just an added feature that allows us to gauge it a little bit better. But certain females can ovulate before and way after. It's not necessarily set in stone. So you have to be very vigilant with your females and the way that they respond to certain males. If they're not responding to your male, there's a very good chance that that female's not ovulating, or it could also be that that male and that female are not, they're not compatible. Not compatible in the sense that if they breed, they're not going to produce. It's just they don't like each other. Certain males don't like females, and certain females don't let males breed. They won't let them.
Yeah.
They won't let them get. They'll get close, and then the moment that they feel like they're too close, they'll just get away. And then you
Yeah.
think that they're gonna breed, but they're not gonna breed. And then the moment you throw another male in there, she lets him lock right away. And it's not that the male wasn't aggressive enough; it's just that she didn't like him. That's why it's important. You know this firsthand, how important it is to have backup males.
Yeah.
I made that mistake the first few years too. I invested heavily in females, and then I was undergunned, thinking that one male could breed to 3-4 females. Bullshit.
That's not happening. Nope.
Oh,
I mean,
not all the time. You'll have one or
no.
two all stars, but then you don't even want to do that to that male.
Yep.
You don't want
Yeah,
to do that to that
best ratio, I mean, minimum ratio, I would say is a 1.1. I say 1.2, two projects and stuff like that. But yeah, if you're doing 1.2, 3, you're gambling. You're
Yeah.
gambling on that male being
And
able
you're
to do a.
big.
Mhm.
You're gambling big because they'll lock, but then you won't have fertility. You'll have a lot of fertility issues because there's no way that they can, they're not like ball pythons and other pythons that can surface a lot of females. They just
Yeah.
don't. They can't.
Yeah, and it's okay to have that a handful of extra males that just for backups, and if you don't use them, you don't use them. But it's one of those things. Better to have it and need
Yeah.
it than not have it and need it.
Exactly. You know how many
Stuff like
times every year, dude, every year I'll have multiple people reaching out to me. Hey, dude, I need this male, bro. My male's not doing it. Female's not compatible. Oh, my male's not eager enough. Last year he took care of all the girls. This year he doesn't want to breed. You only have one male. A lot of people bank on just one specific male. They'll drop money on one very high-end male and two very high-end females, and they think that that project is closed. They run into the issues later on that the male only services one female, and then the other one, he just doesn't want to breed no more.
Yep.
You gotta have backup males. It's important. It's crucial to your success and to your fertility. That's another reason why we did so well in 2024. The only reason why we did so well in 2024, it was a year that I had the most sensible backup males. That's why when you come into my house, you come into the room, you see one whole wall full of males. One whole wall is full of adult males. Every year we cycle out. We get rid of some of the males. We replace some of the males, and I get rid of it sounds derogatory. Sounds like a negative thing. It's not getting rid of, but we replace the adult males with some of the subadult males that have an extra gene or a different bloodline or whatever that we've held back or purchased with intent to breed, and then we'll keep that and we'll keep cycling males. The same thing that we do with females. It's impossible. If I would have kept every female that I produced or every female that I held back from the very beginning to now, I need 3 rooms. So you cycle the ones that there's no logical reason for me to have single gene animals or heads now for a couple years now. And anacondas and all that, you get rid of them. Not rid of them, but you replace the ones that they produced, the animals that they've produced, with the animals that the parents, you start making space and you start progressing. That's how we progress.
And somebody will need them. Somebody will that's starting off sometimes need those males or females and stuff like that.
I've bailed out a lot of people. I've bailed out a lot of people in the last minute. Friends and like acquaintances and just people in general. Hey man, would you happen to have an Exotic anaconda head albino? Yeah. You need him? Okay, I have a snow conda. I don't have an Exotic head albino because it's head for sable as well, or whatever. You try to work out things for people to be able to hit the projects that they're after. So me keeping extra males is beneficial not only to me, but it's proven to help other people too.
Correct. Yeah. You brought up a word that we didn't talk about, cycle, and we're talking about light cycling for brumation.
Yeah,
That's one thing that we didn't touch too much base in it, and that's one, I think, one of the biggest and most important parts of brumation is give them that
yeah,
light deprivation, right?
yeah,
Um, what
yeah.
what it what is your method of giving them light and taking away the light
So
with
my room
brumation?
is at my room. My this light right here, my all my LED lights that are in the room are controlled by a timer, and
Hmm.
they're on 17 hours of light, and the rest is dark. So the animals that are going into brumation, my light cycles don't change according to the season
Hmm.
because it's always spring in here
Hmm.
for the babies, for everything else, because we sell babies all year round, and everything else. Our holdbacks and everything that we do brumate, all the adults and everything, they'll go into brumation. When they go into brumation, it's pitch black. There's no light in there. There's no
Hmm.
light. There's no light cycles there. They need that. It's beneficial for them. It's necessary for them to be in the total dark. At least for me, I when I first brumated, I didn't use a dark enough. Uh, I didn't use a dark enough
Covering.
of barrier. Yeah, and
Hmm.
and and I got some light in there, and I could see the animals acting different then than they did when I brumated the second time when it was pitch black. There was
Hmm.
still movement, even though they were cold. They were still trying to move around more. When it was black, they just relaxed, and I feel like that's what they would do in the wild. They'll go into dens and they'll hang out in groups. That's another reason why I feel like males come out a lot sooner, because it would be easier for them to breed a female that was more chill, more calm than a female that's going 100% awake.
Hmm.
So they'll go around trying to track females. That's probably why we see males go off of feed way before. Like, we're on a schedule with some of those males. You'll notice that the males start to become spotty with feeding, but then they become way more active around October, end of
Yeah,
September, beginning of October. They're way more active. And you're
they
like,
are.
what's going on here? They look like and it's just they don't want to eat, but they're active. And then they start to lose a little bit of weight because they're pacing, just pacing in the bins, and they're always trying to reach females. And I feel like that is another indicator that they'll wake up sooner, because they're gonna try to breed right away, and it's easier to breed a female who's cold than it is a female who's 100% awake.
Hmm.
It's easier for them.
Yeah,
And not just that, possibly not just the breeding aspect, but they can track a female easier because they're not going to be moving around as much. So they'll go into breeding balls. From all the literature that I've read from, you know, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and all that stuff from back in the day, that we've all shared the paperwork with each other and everything. They all state that they're in groups. They'll find them in groups, and then they'll start tracking them as spring comes along, and then you'll notice that there'll be a female here with two males or three males, and there'll be another female not too far away. There'll be with another one male or two males or three males following behind, and they'll get bred. I don't know exactly how fertile that would be, but I would assume that that's a good thing. That's another reason why it's important to have backup males, so you could run the same genetics on that same, two males with the same genetics, and you'll be able to back them up. So like that, your fertility is handled. There is such a thing as dual sire clutches. So if you use two different males that are different genetics, sometimes you can't tell what they are, and that's why a lot of
yeah,
people get animals that they raise up for 2-3 years, and by the time they breed it, they're sold as such, because when that person produced it, they thought that it was that one specific male, but it turned out to be a dual sire clutch that they had no idea was the problem. And then later on, we're like, oh well, if that wasn't the male, then it was this male, and then they breed it according to what the backup male was, and then it proves out.
hmm, yeah.
So those
You
are
know,
things you have to be mindful. I mean,
yeah,
we've gotten off subject a little bit, but they're nuggets. They're little things that people need to understand when they're getting
yeah,
into breeding.
yeah. Because brumation leads into breeding, right? That's one of the
Yeah.
main, um, you know, reasons why we brumate hog nose and stuff like that. Now, if you own a pet, do you think they should brumate? Is it necessary?
Yeah. Some of them will brumate no matter what.
Correct.
A lot of the times, the feeding strikes that people go are magically fixed 7 to 8 weeks after. They'll go on a
Hmm.
7-week fasting frenzy, or they won't want to eat and they're hissy and they just want to be left alone. They're like, oh my God, he was so friendly, and all of a sudden he just got really hissy, or she got really hissy, doesn't want to, just wants to be left alone. I put the food and she doesn't want to move. She's moving around, or he's moving around because the temperature is so warm, but then they lose body weight. Or your animal's sick. No, my animal is not, doesn't acting sick, but it's just losing weight. Yeah, it's dehydrating because it wants to just relax. It's not gonna eat because it feels the barometric pressure around there. Where you're in California and you're in the middle of a winter cold snap, the animal's gonna kick into brumation whether you have temperature or not. More often than not, not always, but more often than not. And then they'll go on those hunger strikes. People associate hunger strike being a negative thing and not a positive, because usually it's around temperature. You can go to the Facebook groups, you can go to a bunch of places, and you'll notice that as soon as the first real cold snap happens, a lot of people will start a week and a half, 2 weeks later, they're gonna start posting, oh, my animal went off feed, it was eating so phenomenal. And then you'll have people that'll go on there and be like, oh, try scenting. Oh, I tried all scents and it didn't work. It's not that the animal is sick or anything. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's brumating.
Yep.
Cut the heat off. Turn the light off as much as you can. If you can, put construction paper and make it as dark as possible while it still has ventilation, please don't suffocate it. But just try to keep it as cool as possible. If you want to find the coolest room in the house and put them there, in 6 to 7 weeks, you bring it back out and it'll be fine. It usually will eat right away.
Yeah.
Then you
I think the biggest thing too is during that time is it's just providing fresh water for them to drink. And that's the biggest thing. Like, one thing I saw, that I was checking water bowls today, and I came out, my animals went back into the rack Wednesday or Thursday, something like that. And I used the 12-ounce deli cups for watering, and they're almost all gone. Definitely not evaporation, stuff like that. They're almost all gone because they're in there rehydrating. Even though we keep them, we brumate them in the moist cocoa core, they need that rehydration. And that's the biggest, I think, one of the biggest benefits of necessity things that need when they come out of brumation. The food is second, right? Like the water, the rehydration, and then once they really kick into that breeding process, the food is going to come.
I think that's one of the hardest things that's one of the hardest lessons to learn with hognose. Hognose don't want dry. They like humidity. They like it and they need it. A lot of hognose won't just drink out of a water bowl. They'll gain moisture from the air. That's why they kind of prefer to hide certain times a year, because it's dry. It's cold. It's dry. If it's very hot and humid, they'll find serenity, and they'll cool down in the dirt. Like, it's necessary for you to give them cooling when it's hot, or hot when it's cold, and for them to be able to have a temperature gradient so that they can thermoregulate. If they don't thermoregulate, then you're gonna have issues. Humidity is a big part. A lot of animals that are dehydrated won't eat, and if they do eat, they'll regurge. They feel comfortable. It's not just too big of a meal. It's not crypto. It's not that. It's just you're not giving them everything that they need. You're not supplying the fundamentals. You're not supplying their basic care. Moist hides, how important moist hides are, and a lot of people don't use moist hides. So if you don't use a moist hide, then how are they getting humidity? You got to mist in there at least once or twice. You don't have to mist the animal, but you can mist in their bin, or you can mist in their create some humidity. Sometimes the substrate that people use, like we were using before, will mold. Okay, so now that means you won't be able to do that. Now you got to think outside the box. You got to find an alternative. What is the alternative? If you're keeping them in a big enough enclosure, then that means you could use a hide. Use a hide with some cocoa core. If you can't, then soak the animal for a day, 2 or 3 days before you feed it. Soak it for 15-20 minutes. Just make sure that when you soak an animal and you put it in there, if it poops, take the dirty water out and replenish it with fresh water. Don't let it sit in there. Some people soak an animal, they'll put it in a bin with water, they'll leave it there, they'll walk away, and by the time they come back 30-40 minutes later, it's poop. The water is it's a poop shake. And then they'll drink the water, because 9 out of 10 times they won't drink right away. They'll relax in there, they'll poop, and then they'll start to drink the water afterwards. So you got to make sure you're keeping that in mind too. Um,
with because right now for most people, brumation is coming to an end. Animals coming out of brumation and stuff like that. One of the other questions I've gotten is, when should I brumate? What time of year? What is your suggestion to that?
I feel like my suggestion to that is subjective. Because I know people in California, their animals will go off a feed as early as October,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's certain places where they won't get cold fronts until December. So you gotta base it off of your region. You gotta base it off of your area, your climate. If you're gonna have a really cold winter, sometimes we don't have a cold front until December. We won't have a cold front at all, and animals won't go off a feed. But if we don't have a schedule, then we won't. But we already know that for Florida, if you're gonna do your first round of brumation, you're gonna want to take it. You're gonna want to do that in November. So you have
Yeah.
all December, January, and you bring them out in the beginning of February or in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of February. My normal schedule is going in at the middle of November to Thanksgiving, and then they come out on the day after Valentine's or the
Mm-hmm.
week, the like 2 3 days after Valentine's. That's usually my schedule. And then by the
Yeah.
time that you warm them up and do all of that, it's like another week or two. You feed them, so on and so forth. But that's the first round. But then you have females that are ovulate before they go into brumation. So they're ovulating while they're in brumation. When you come out and you try to breed them, they don't do anything. The male's locked and everything. You got no clutches. You got nothing.
Yeah.
So if
Very true.
you gotta be very observant of what it is. You can breed a girl out of brumation, like without brumating, but the fertility goes down, in my opinion. Not just that, it's harder for you to hit her when she's really in full ovulation. It's a little bit more, it's easier to control because
Yeah.
had shed cycles. Another thing too that we didn't talk about is when they come out of brumation, some females won't shed. A lot of people wait until they shed to pair because that's when they say it's ovulation. If
Mm-hmm.
you sit and wait for the female to shed when you pair, nine out of 10 times, for me at least, females won't ovulate. They won't give you an ovulation shed.
Correct.
They'll
Yeah.
just ovulate. The
Yeah.
only shed you get is gonna be a prelay shed.
Mm-hmm.
So if I waited for that animal, that female, to go into ovulation shed, I would have missed the cycle.
You would missed. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's another good topic. Like, ovulation sheds. These animals, don't have such a big swell up that they need to shed, right?
Nope.
So you be able to miss them, and that's why brumation is so important, because it gives you a range of, okay, coming out of brumation, they should be able to restart their breeding cycle, and you start pairing.
Yeah.
Unlike bigger animals like bell pythons and stuff like that, it's very difficult to ultrasound. So try to pinpoint ovulation, follicle growth and stuff like that. It's almost impossible because of how
Yeah.
how much of a smaller animal they are.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's definitely much more difficult. I mean, I'm sure it's doable because the process of producing eggs, and from egg follicles all the way to egg production and laying, it should be very similar.
Hmm.
The issue is the size. It's a
Correct.
lot smaller animal. It's a
Hmm.
lot smaller animal. But I also feel like with the procedures that we have in place, and the regimen that we have learned to rely on, is pretty consistent. It's pretty consistent. The success is pretty consistent.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debates out there of should you or should you not, and those should you or should you not can be different by region. So what we do in Florida and we preach that we cannot bypass or cut corners on is not as necessary or as detrimental to a successful season for somebody in the Midwest. But for us here, it's crucial. It's life or death pretty much for us, for our season. So another thing too that people don't realize is fertility. Males need a lot of calcium for fertility as well, just not only vitamins too.
Hmm.
We had that with the geckos when I was breeding Rhacodactylus. a lot of males were shooting blanks, and we're like, what's going on? You got to up calcium. You rely on all these diets that are made, industry made diets that are formulated for that. But if you don't add calcium and you don't add that, you you're running into issues with fertility as well.
Yeah.
And with animals, with the stuff that feed, a lot of the animals that people are feeding, all the rodents are third party rodents that we're already aware of, and whatever quality of food that they're eating is subpar because animals are having issues with egg binding and so many other issues that come from feeding those diets. Also, a lot of these animals that people are breeding are also obese, and that feeds into all the issues that can stem from obesity and from having poor rodents, the quality of food. All of that correlates to your success.
Very true.
One of the things that we worked on, how picky we are with feeders.
Mm-hmm.
We pay a little extra, but we're getting the quality. We have friends that are willing to sell us their surplus and actually also you know bump up and beef up their production so that they can handle uh, our collections and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, we're always grateful for. But we also owe part of our success to those little things that we don't bypass.
Correct. Yeah. It's the famous saying, you are what you eat. If your animal's eating, low quality food and stuff like that, same thing. Depends on what they're feeding your feeder that you're giving your snake. If
Yeah.
it's high calorie, high fat, no low protein, they're
Hmm.
not gonna have nutrition in their own bodies to be able to feed
Yeah.
off your animals. So that's a lot all very important parts. One thing that talking about feedings, it's do you suggest like a animal being a certain weight or to go into brumation, or as long as it's healthy it can go into brumation?
I've so that's a very good question,
Hmm.
and I like to learn, and I like to learn new things, and I'll be the type to try something and be a little ballsy with stuff. I've put females that didn't necessarily bounce back completely from brumation. Those were animals that were eating and and keeping food down, but they weren't really gaining any weight. Deworming them, the whole nine. I feel like those animals, after we brumated them, they actually started to pack on weight. So I
Hmm.
feel like there is a benefit to it. A lot of benefits that come from brumation. I don't think an animal could be too small. As far as sick goes, yeah, I'm sure that it's a little stressful on animals that are already dealing with something. So I wouldn't put an animal into brumation that is iffy. I would deworm it once it starts to be back on track or whatever it is you do, and you feel like brumation is the way to go. I would brumate, but again, I would not. I don't have a lot of sick animals, if any at all. But whenever there is an issue, we treat it, we handle it. Those animals get, put to a side where they're quarantined in a different room. And those animals will not be brumated with general population. If they
Hmm.
were to get brumated and they were to be put into general population because they've already been, deemed healthy and everything, then we'll go ahead and brumate them. But smaller animals, I've heard of people brumating um, preemie babies, like preemie clutches,
Hmm.
because they weren't feeding well. And those are talking about, animals that are 3-4 grams. The average animal is 5-6-7 grams. So we're talking about half the size of an average hatchling,
Yeah.
and successfully actually helping they come
Yeah.
out, eating, and they weren't eating before. And I feel like that is definitely a sign that the animal, as long as it's a healthy animal, there isn't anything internally damaged or missing or anything like that, then there's definitely benefits to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the biggest thing with like you mentioned was like females maybe that after breeding are taking longer to pack on weight, but are eating and are behaving normal behavior and stuff like that. Normal feedings. I think going into brumation gives them that reset that they need, gives them that break of the body over processing everything, and they
Yeah.
come out and it's like brand new again. You
Yeah.
know.
Definitely. I think there's definitely an upside to that too. I know I know that I've seen. I've brumated for 8 years now. I've brumated for 8 years now. This is my 8th year now. We're halfway through my 8th year,
Mm-hmm.
and I've only had 2 animals pass away, and I've brumated the same animals for quite a while, quite a few times, and fresh faces, new animals going into brumation. I've actually brumated friends' animals as well because I have the fridges connected all year round, so I've been able to brumate friends' animals that were not doing well for them, that were
Mm-hmm.
not bouncing back because they weren't eating, and they've kicked back into feeding.
Yep.
So there's definitely a lot of advantages. Definitely, I feel like
Yep.
I feel like a lot of people don't utilize that cheat code because they're too worried about the outcome. They're thinking that their animals are going to pass away. They're going, they're scared of the fact that they're not going to have the control of them because they're putting them in a fridge and everything. But once they get past that psychologically, and they see the benefits, then they're believers again. They're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I could deal with it because there actually is benefits to it,
Yeah.
and,
That's
and
like,
it's a process. It's a painful
yeah,
process to learn.
yeah. That's it. Like you're saying, the brumating babies that are, you've tried all the scenting, you've tried live, all that stuff. And sometimes a 3 week brumation can kick on a baby,
Mhm.
and then they start eating again. And sometimes the best feeders.
Yeah, I have one that comes to mind. We were chasing the lavender superconda for 5 years. 5 years we were there. We produced
Hmm.
a handful of lavender condas, raised those up, produced unrelated heads, raised those up. We aimed for it. We got like 70 something eggs, probably 70 something, 70, close to 80 eggs between 3 females. And we hit one lavender superconda. That one lavender superconda was 100% heifer albino. She was one of those that did not want to eat. I tried scenting. I tried doing everything. That was a pinnacle animal. We were the second one, I believe, to produce the lavender superconda. Second or third. And we produced the same year that somebody else produced it. But I don't know if it was first. We were second. I know we weren't first. We were second or third to produce it. And let me tell you something. I was one that I was like, I can't let this animal. I don't want any animal to pass away. But if any, I don't want none of the pinnacle animals, obviously.
Hmm.
So I go in there and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try this. I tried scenting. We have a concoction of mixes, and they're usually consistent. She didn't want any. She was just hissy. As soon as they opened the bin, she was like one of those that has like amazing aiming and musks everywhere. Usually hits you in your face, and you're like, what the hell? Well, put her into brumation. 2 weeks. Brought her out 2 weeks later. I gave her 3 days, 4 days. Put her back on heat. Phenomenal feeder. To this
Yeah.
day, she's actually in brumation now.
Yep.
To this day, she's produced for me consistently 3 years now. This is gonna be her third year. She's produced for me. Phenomenal. Always double clutches. Never had an issue with her.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
grew. She was an average baby, but she had a slow start, and she had a slow start because she was just one of those finicky feeders, finicky
Hmm.
babies, and I put her into brumation. 2 weeks, brought her back out. Phenomenal feeder,
Yeah.
and to this day, she said never skipped a
Yeah.
meal.
See, this is the important, you know experience brings. It's given exact actual, not just theory, right? Like we all can read a book, we all can listen to somebody say it, but until you put that theory into practice,
Mm-hmm.
somebody like you that going almost 8 years, go into your 8 year of brumation, have so many different experiences with brumating animals, brumating babies, and giving us an example like this is so important, to be able to take that in and listen, and be
Yeah,
able to talk to someone that has that. It's very important, that's willing to share that information directly to
yeah,
the other people that are just getting into it, or maybe run into that same issue, right?
yeah,
They can go back and rewatch this, and say, I heard something somewhere about this, let me go look
yeah.
at this, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the things too that I was trying to explain. I too had to have a mentor that
Hmm.
took me under his wing and showed me. Jamie, you know Jamie from JNC
Hmm.
Hognos. He was one of the ones that was like, dude, I've been brumating for so long. That's what you're missing. I had
Hmm.
covered all other parameters relatively well. But that was that one piece that I was missing that made all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have been able to get over that hurdle if I wouldn't have had somebody that said, look, this is what I'm doing, follow me. I'll tell you what to do, you know? And being a Floridian, you know, I'm in his backyard. I would be his direct competition. But at that point, he's not thinking of it that way because he sees that I'm a genuine person. I have a concern. He knows the answer, and he's willing to give me the information that I need to be successful. And, you know, that's what this community is filled with. But there's also the bad side, the dark side to it, where a lot of people are competitive and rather not give you information because they know that you have the potential to become a competition, you know, and they would give you bad information. They'll go as far as giving you bad information. Not giving you any information is better than giving you bad information, because when you're full send and you're going into the bad information, you make so many mistakes, which is what happened to us in the very beginning. A lot of bad information, dude. I had to rewrite everything and be like, okay, look, I've mastered a lot of different and difficult species. Let me just, you know, let me do this right again. Let me just rewrite everything and start from scratch. And it helped. It helped a lot. A lot of the information I was having was also for people that were in different regions that they have different obstacles. That didn't correlate with me at the time. It correlated afterwards. Like, it made sense after. I'm like, you know, I'm supposed to do this when this happens, but I don't even have that issue. My issue comes from the total opposite. And then you have to, you know, kind of like deal with it as it comes. Yeah. But that's why it takes a big part of our success that we have now, for, you know, as good or as bad as we are, comes from passion. If I wasn't a passionate person, and if I wasn't the type of person that I am, that I give everything to what I'm doing, I feel like I would not, probably me and you wouldn't have met, because I probably would have given up a long time ago. Yeah. Because of how many issues I had in the very beginning. And then talking to bigger breeders kind of gave me a different perspective. And then, you know, meeting Jamie helped me out a lot.
Yeah, and with Jamie, you know, because he's right down the road from me as well, you know, his brumation experience didn't even start with hognose. It was other species. So he already had experience from different species that he brought into hognose. Yeah. So that's, you know, that's very interesting to think about that.
I had different experience with brumation too. I had when I was breeding chameleons, like on a very large scale, I with panther chameleon eggs, I would break the diapause, so I would make them hatch a little sooner, because you can cool them down and then bring them back up, and that also mimics winter, it mimics the seasons, so the animal, the eggs actually can tell. So you can do that. You can break the diapause. You could speed it up, you know, 2-3 months by doing that. And I was one of those that actually understood how that worked, so I was able to bypass, and it helped me in the long run. So I had an idea of how to do it or what to do. I just didn't know the steps that it would take until somebody sat me down and told me. Because everybody just says, oh, put them in a wine cooler and bring the temperature down to 50 degrees and you'll be fine. To leave them there for 8 weeks. Like, there's so many questions that
there's just so much in between. Like, you could have fed that animal, put it into the brumation, and that last meal rotted in them, killed them, and all that stuff, right?
That's what happens to people, and then they think that brumation is not for them, but they didn't really give it a good go. You give brumation a good go, you should be okay, because there's a lot of us that do it frequently. There's people that brumate different groups of animals 3-4 times a year. So it's not unheard of for you to do a couple times a year, or different times of a year. So, but again, you have to make sure the animal is empty. You have to make sure that the animal is healthy, and you also have to make sure. That's another thing, that a lot of people don't even know when their animal is healthy or isn't healthy. And that's one of the things about the groups. You'll have somebody that's so proud of their animal, they post the animal, and the animal is literally clicking on death's door, and then they get, you know, bombarded with a whole bunch of negativity. Like, oh, you don't even know what you're doing. Look at your animal. Your animal looks like this and this and this and that. And it's like, yo, you know, how are you going to teach? You teach the person that the animal looks like this, and that's possibly because of this. And you teach them how to be a better keeper, not just, you know, ream them because you know somebody that, you know, does a better job and did research, and then this person didn't do research or whatever. Yeah. Sometimes a mom is, you know, helping a kid out. How many times have you had that happen where a mom is getting a kid, and now she's like, you know, my son is doing a great job, but I'm stepping in and I feel like I'm doing him harm because he wants to do this, but I don't know if it's legitimate or not, and then they'll sit there and ask you for your advice and you give them your advice and then they go home and the animal is perfect now because they did the switches and changes and they fix it. They fixed the problem. There was a problem.
Yeah, we're gonna take one more question and then we're gonna close it out. Adara asking if you brumate babies, do you shorter time than adults?
No, for me, if I'm gonna brumate babies, so when I'm brumating a group, if I'm gonna brumate a group that's intentionally, like let's say November in the beginning, when we're gonna start doing a group, those are all adults. When I brumate the babies or my sub adults or anything is on a different schedule. And you can brumate babies 2 months, 3 months. It doesn't make a difference.
Correct.
It doesn't make a difference. Though shorter brumation is for feeding non-feeders that you want to try to keep the feeding. But if you're brumating your animals to put them on a set schedule, you're gonna run them the whole time. It's like babies in the wild are not gonna have a short brumation because they're babies. They gotta go through the whole thing. Correct. And it's survival of the fittest at that point. So if you give your animals the right care and you treat them as you treat your adults, or you make sure that they're empty by the time you brumate in the whole night, they'll be okay.
Yeah. No, I agree.
You did it this year too. This was the first year that you did it, right?
No, second year.
Your second year? Yeah. So you notice a difference. A lot of people think that because you brumate your babies that you're losing that growth. It's not true. It's not true at all. It's not true. They might not be as big as you would think if you kept them up feeding once they come out of brumation. But 2 months later, they're catching up and sometimes surpassing the animals that did not get brumated.
Correct. Yeah. No,
and they look healthier. They're more robust, like a well-rounded animal, like a very confident animal. Is what I like to compare it to a confident and a non-confident animal. You can have a non-confident animal because it's never been brumated the whole night and very timid, shy, or whatever. Then you come out of brumation, it's like a completely different animal. Different animal. Very confident, it's just a different animal.
Yeah.
You got to try it to understand it. It's like one of those things, like, fatherhood. Oh, what's the feeling when you have your baby? Everybody could explain it, but does not even come close to you experience it. Once you're there and you're in it and you experience it, you could explain that feeling to somebody else and it's not even going to come close. And
no, for sure.
It's something that you have to actually see your animals. You can have a problematic animal, and the moment that you come out of brumation, it's a completely different animal. It might not happen for all of them, but there's a very good amount of them, a large amount, a good portion of them that do come out a lot better.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. We're going to start closing it out. Last question I have for you is shows are starting back up again now that, holidays are done and stuff like that. What's the next show that people can find you at?
So we're gonna be doing Reptilian Nation now in February. That's gonna be the next show. So all my Florida peeps, I'm gonna be there. Then we have Dallas in March, end of March. I think it's 26th through the 28th, or 26, 27, 28. And then April, we're working on a show. We're working on a show now. Hopefully, we're able to get in. And then May, we're also working on a show. June, we're going to be back in Pomona for the Super Show. We're going to be July, Pacific Northwest, I believe. We're going to be in there also working on that one as well. So we're going to have, we're aiming for one show every month. So a show a month. That's our goal this year.
Perfect.
Last year, we did one show every 2 months. And then there was some months that we actually did one a month. It wasn't just every month. And that's because we were trying to get into shows and we weren't able to get in.
All right. So you guys heard it. If you're in those areas, Cali, Dallas, Houston, Pacific Northwest, make sure you guys keep a lookout for Eslin.
Yeah.
Definitely going to have a variety of hog nose and stuff that available.
We're going to be doing the Louisiana too. Louisiana shows.
Oh, Louisiana too. Yeah.
Louisiana's. Atlanta shows. Quite a few shows.
Yep. So make sure you guys, go follow him on Instagram, Facebook, and keep up to date with what he's got on his morph market as well. And if you're looking for something specific that's not listed on the morph market, message him directly. And you might be looking for something you don't see, but he might have it in his racks. Or if you're looking for, a animal that he's letting go from his breedings, just message him. You never know what you can get.
You
But
know,
with that, yeah,
you know, when you came here, you're like, okay, I didn't even know you had all this. I didn't even know you had these animals either.
yeah,
It's just hard
yeah.
for me to put stuff on Morph Market all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, guys, thank you again for joining in tonight. One big shout out, to Eslin for all the knowledge he's given us tonight. Brumation. One big announcement that I do have is that February 1st, we're going to be launching our Patreon. So that's going to go live February 1st. And we're going to go more into deep dives in our Patreon content of more specific things that, people need help with, either breeding, what's it called, pairings, any information that you guys want about Western Hognose, we're going to be doing there. And we're going to be bringing on guests as well in smaller group settings where we're going to do videos and you guys can talk to one another and have a group community, right? What we were talking about, these are, communities and teams. So we're going to try to build that for ourselves as well. So make sure you guys take a look at that through our social media, and we'll be back here in the next 2 weeks. So, any last words, Eslin, before we let the people go?
No, I want to thank you for allowing us to share your platform again, and I'm happy to see the progress that you've had with you and the scale success. Also, your breeding facility is growing. Your family is getting into it more and more.
Yeah,
Thankfully, now we got Lori on. We got her on board. But yeah,
yeah,
I'm happy. I appreciate you allowing me to come on here and everything. So
for sure,
thank
for
you.
sure. Thank you, thank you. All right, guys. Good night. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.